Okay, so unless I boomered the audio again, we should be live.
Hey everybody, how's it going?
Hey everyone, how's it going?
And welcome to the Stormkeep number 11. We are going to be talking about external and internal balance. It's something we talk about on our Discord and just, between us a lot. It's kind of a niche concept. I didn't know if people would be interested, but this is what we're talking about today, so we're going to do it because we're interested, and hopefully we can make people interested in talking about it. And then we're also going to talk about the Painting Vanquishers contest that we had going on. It just wrapped up a couple days ago on August 31st, and we had a lot of great entries. And this contest was done because we have a new sponsor on the channel, which is Kaiju Gaming Lounge. They're in Orlando, Florida. They sponsor our painting contest and soon-ish our merchandise. So if you guys want to get like some Stormkeep dice or measuring sticks and things like that, we're going to have you covered. And they're helping us out with that. They just finished up their Kickstarter campaign to open up a new gaming space, and they've got a website coming soon, so keep an eye on kaijugaminglounge.com, and we are very grateful for their sponsorship. I know Dan is actually a local player. He's not with us tonight because he's on a boat, as the song goes. So he can't speak to them, but he is a local player there, and that's where he's going to be gaming. So I'm looking forward to someday traveling south of the border and meeting up with them. It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
So introductions, I'm Paul. If you're catching the Stormkeep for the first time, nice to meet you. My name is Paul.
We're going.
I'm Jack. How you guys doing tonight?
And Jack's camera is going at approximately 2 frames per second, which is fantastic.
It really is. It really is. But I'm going to roll with it.
I think it's just going to keep getting funnier as long as we're going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see how everybody's feeling in the chat today. BCP is here. Chase is here. How you guys doing? Okay. Let's jump into the painting contest results. So the painting contest, we do these every so often. We try to do them as, oh gosh, I'd like to do it every month. That would be great if we could get up to that pace. That's the goal. So we're trying to get there. This was the August 2022 painting contest. We decided to do Vanquishers because we're all pretty hot on Vanquishers right now. We always liked the models, but we didn't really have a reason to play with them, which is like the worst thing in the world when you get these cool new models and their rules are just awful. But then Season 1 came out, and now they're good and cool. And,
yeah, they are.
We can use
amazing.
them. Yeah, they're fantastic. You drop a squad of 5 with an Imperatant, you get a 7-inch charge, you clear out 20 ghosts, they die on the counterattack, but then you revive them on the other side of the map, and you do it all over again. And they're veterans.
Yeah, in Bounty Hunters, there's not many GBs out there that can withstand 5 Vanquishers. Yeah, like Blight Kings are probably like one of the few ones, or like Blade Bearers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, anytime you're fighting veterans with these guys, they just feel great. Fantastic. And for only 10 points more, anytime you're not fighting veterans, it's like, whatever.
Oh yeah.
It's like, could have been Liberators, and I've got 10 points.
Yeah, I like that sweet 7-inch unlocking for 10 points. I think that's a fair tax.
On its own, that's pretty good, right?
For sure. Yeah, that's absolutely a good trade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we ran entries from August 10th to August 31st. We had over 20 people jump in. It was a kind of a short notice thing, so I'm pretty happy that we got that many entries. And we have 3 prizes to pick from. They're listed on the Discord server. So first place will get the first pick of the prizes, second place will get second pick, and then third place will get whatever's left over. And those will be shipped out courtesy of Kaiju Gaming Lounge. So we are grateful to them. Thanks a lot, guys. And let's jump into the results. We'll just get rid of our faces here. All right, so first up, we've got a number of honorable mentions. For this one done by Cat Snake. I think we are definitely biased here towards black armor with red robes. Like, that color scheme just looks so good on Stormcast. So anytime we see that like at least one person votes that and tends to make it into the honorable mentions. So yeah, you're going to see this color scheme repeated a lot in our contest. But this one's really well done. I love the white face skull mask on the Vanquisher Prime there. I think that looks really distinct with the red gem in the center of it. It looks very cool.
Yeah, super cool.
There's also something I wanted to point out here that I'm too lazy to do this with my painting, but you can see on the shoulder pad on the Vanquisher second from the left or second from the right, on that little Sigmar icon, they actually have a gold plate and then a ceramite, is that the right word? Ceramic icon on top of that. And usually
he has a gold trim around the Sigmar face, basically.
And I just paint mine one color because I'm too lazy to go into that much detail because it's like
yes, mostly same, but yeah, this is like one of those Vanquishers are just amazing looking models, and it makes me wish more of our model range had robes on them because it's one of the few reasons I really love this. Like just flowing robes and armor just looks so cool.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely.
Especially these half cloaks. I don't know why I never thought of this before, but these like a robe just on one of your legs, it looks really cool.
Yeah.
Really surprising.
Yeah,
cool.
I'm really looking forward to painting mine.
Mm-hmm. I think I like what the bases here. They're simple, but they're kind of subdued. Like they don't have to be extravagant, right? Like the realms are a very diverse place. Like you don't have to have pink grass, like we'll see in another honorable mention, which I love, by the way. But you don't have to do that stuff. You know, it's elegant. It's just the right amount of cracking in certain spots. It's nice colors. I think the only thing I'd change here is the rim color. I think I'd do like a brownish, maybe even like what's the Citadel color? XV88. I'd probably do something like that.
Steel Legion Drab.
Or Steel Legion Drab, yeah. Something like that I think would fit better than the black rims because you've got black armor and black rims, so it kind of creates this like, I don't know, your eye just kind of melds it together. So I think that
I could see that.
Yeah, it looks good though. I like it. I like it a lot. This is a really cool entry. Next up, honorable mentions. We've got Casserole. So this one features these really cool constellation patterns on the cloaks and on the what would you call them? Thigh plates, like the hip plates, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's got those going on, and those look pretty neat. I think I might steal that idea, honestly. That looks really neat. And then it's got this cool, like, flaming, glowing sword thing going on. Like, it's just hot to the touch, which looks really neat.
Yeah, the fire power sword effect is really cool.
Yeah, I absolutely adore any constellation pattern on Stormcast. I think that it always ends up looking awesome.
Yeah, we don't get enough of the heavenly aspect of Stormcast. Like Celestin Prime has got it nailed. Nothing else really has it modeled, and I think that's a shame.
Yeah.
Yeah, like these look like they dropped straight from Azir. I also appreciate that he went completely helmetless. As someone who struggles at painting faces himself, bold choice, and he clearly knows, they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Got a bunch of different hairstyles, hair colors. You got black, brown, red. Yeah, I like this. I also like the basing. Like it's a bit like frigid, but also muddy frigid. Not like just straight like white powder on there. Call it snow, or whatever. It has some like. I like.
The white tufts were a really interesting choice. I think they work pretty well because the entire color palette for these models, like if you look at the silver trim on gold armor, you never see that color, right? It's always gold trim on silver armor, not the other way around. But because it's accented with not like purplish bluish hues on the black, because it's white hues, grayish hues, the silver trim ties that in, and then all of that is tied in together with the white elements on the bases. Now the white rims here might be going a little bit too far. I might maybe gray those down just a little bit darker, but it depends on the whole army. I'd have to see it from different shots, but I think this looks great overall.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I definitely don't have this many helmetless Stormcast. I prefer the helmets. They're so much easier to paint.
Yeah.
Fantastic work, Casserole. I like these little bricks too. These are not sculpted bases. I think maybe the one on the right is, but the remainder look like these little bricks that you can get at hobby stores, and you kind of just piled them on in a decorative manner. I think that looks really cool.
And that seems way easier than doing the cork board, which is what I've been doing for my paving stones.
Yeah, the downside of cork is that it's the same elevation across the whole base, right? Like if you just stick a piece of cork on a base, it just goes flat across, and you can tell it's cork. With something like this, I know it's not really a ruin, but it looks more like a ruined building, which looks better, more natural. Yeah. Ironically.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to make cork. Yeah, unless you like cut it in a weird way to add some
Mhm.
texture.
Is that a water feature on the right side there? It maybe the
It
lighting
might
is
be
hitting it.
like a frozen lake, maybe. Yeah.
We'll
Well,
have
it looks
to.
like resin, like dried resin made to look like.
It does, yeah. I think just the light's hitting it at the wrong angle, so it kind of just looks like raised mud. But I think it's a water feature. So Casserole, if you're watching this, post another picture from above because I want to see what's going on with that. If you did like a water feature, I want to pick your brain about it because that's something I always wanted to get into with basing.
What do we have next?
Next up, this is an entry from Delmore, and it's very beautiful. It's stunning. Unfortunately, Delmore was one day after the deadline, so we can't place him. We can't give prizes. It's got the black armor, which I said is gonna get you at least one vote on our podcast. So the black armor is great. The red cloth is great. Really nice tones. Like the deep red cloth is really deep. You can see that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The blue swords obviously are the centerpiece here. They're gorgeous, right? That fade from really dark black blue into a nice bright one, and the edge highlights and the cross hatching across to give the element of light shining across. It looks great. This is fantastic.
He's even got battle damage on there. Like the black armor has like scratches on there.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty good.
Yep.
Yeah.
Really good.
Did you guys notice that the Prime's shoulder pad is upside down?
I absolutely did.
Oh my god. On the right shoulder, yeah.
And I was like, go for it, dude. Go for it.
Yeah,
They're
why
your
not?
models.
That's an interesting idea. I kind of want to see what a whole squad would look like with that.
It's kind of, it basically goes with the like how the Liberators are, because for them the gold trim is on the outside.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's basically that, but yeah.
So the bases are nicely done. It's got a nice gradient of colors. It's not just monotone. I kind of wish we could see these guys turned around so we would see what the back of the bases looks like, because it looks like there's like lighting on these bases. Like the front half of it is brighter and the back half is darker, which makes me wonder what's going on in the back half of the base there. If there's like object source lighting and that's done intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
And the black rim works here because unlike the other bases, there's enough going on in terms of color palette that the black rim, it doesn't just meld together with the black armor here, because you've got these blue elements on the swords, you've got the pink on the hilt, you've got all these colors on the bases. Your eye doesn't immediately attach those two things together. So I think the black rim,
I think going for a grassland approach with like bright red plants was a good call here if you're gonna have black rims, because it breaks apart the continuity of black armor. It's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I noticed that helps to distinguish it is that I think the armors have a satin finish and the base rims have a matte finish, so that you can really easy tell by the way the light reflects off of it that there's a different scheme there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right about that. That's good.
I did do the same thing on my guys.
That looks nice, and also little hints of green on the gems and their weapons. You can see a little additional color being added there. So this is pretty good, pretty dang good. This is excellent, even. If I kept doing my anvil scheme when I did my Thunderstrike, this is pretty much what I would have gone with. I definitely would have gone with the blue weapons too. That's such a nice color to add into a unit like this. It does really well. Adding in like a completely different color from your standard elements, right? Like the standard color scheme here is black, gold, and red. And when you add this blue color on a unit, it immediately identifies it on the battlefield. It's like, oh, that's the Vanquisher squad. I'm looking for the blue. I found it. There it is. And it also, it doesn't break away from the main color scheme of the army. So I love doing stuff like this. I love picking an extra color and adding it to a specific unit in my army. I always try to find something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep, beautiful work, Delmore. Sorry that you missed the deadline. Yep. Next up, Baba Jisi. Unfamiliar with how to pronounce your name, and I apologize if I got that wrong. I'm going to go with Baba Jisi until corrected otherwise. So this is great. I love, first off, the flaming swords, right? That looks really, really cool from a distance. If you get really close, you can tell how it looks. But from this distance, like tabletop distance, it's a great effect. It looks really, really cool. And I also love that these guys are like in the weeds. You know, the grass is growing above them, and it kind of even gives them motion. Like if you look on the one on the right, the way the grass folds around the foot actually looks like they're thrusting into that position, and the grass is moving around them as a result of that. It looks really, really cool.
Oh yeah. Really, a lot of into the wild kind of gives it off an into the wild. It's pretty nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the feet and the cloaks are all dirty. Like they've been walking around in this grass for a while. They didn't just teleport here. It looks really great. The gold is a fantastic tone along with the. See, I didn't think the teal worked at first because it's just on the hilts and the banner on the musician and then the banner on the standard bearer, but it actually does work. Like this color palette is really cool because of the specific tones of gold and the cloth color that they're going with. It all works together. Nothing is too far out there. The green stands out nicely. The flaming swords stand out nicely. Typically, you don't have that many elements stand out that much because it's too much to look at. But it works pretty well for this unit because it's very specific places.
Oh yeah.
I also want to point out the banner has a nice fade going on. It's not just that teal color. There's actually, if you look on the inside of the banner, there's a gradient there from like a darker teal to a brighter teal, and that's a place I wouldn't have thought to put that kind of detail, but it accents the Sigmar's icon in the middle, and it makes it look like there's like light building towards it, so it looks brighter and it draws your attention towards it, which looks really, really cool.
Yeah, and I can tell you, this good job, Baba, because I tried to do that same thing on my Vindicator or my Vindictors, and it is tough. That is because that thing is tiny.
Yeah, it like we've blown it up on the photos. I haven't painted my Painting Vanquisher yet, and I've been taking my squads without them because you can't take them in 5s, and it's very difficult to paint that one.
Yeah, because it's tough. So good job.
What do you guys think about? We've seen a few entries now, and a few people are using the same color on the shoulder pads that they use for the rest of the armor. Do you guys generally like that, or do you like having a different color on the shoulder pad?
How do you mean rest of the? Oh, you mean
like here it's silver armor, and the shoulder pads are silver as well.
I generally tend to go for a different color. Like I generally tend to go to the color that I did on my robes. So like I'll match. If I'm doing Anvils with the Hilton Hammer, I'll do red shoulder pads. Unless it's the left one on the prime, that one I leave gold. Yeah. I have some as Hammers of Sigmar, so I'll do blue on the shoulder pads. The shoulder pads for me are a place to add a little more detail, like a little more like pop, I guess. But I don't know. I guess for this scheme, it really works, like having silver shoulder pads, because like you said, like the robes and the sword are what like then help balance that color palette.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But normally, if you just had like if this guy had just like a normal silver sword, it would not be good with this. But because they have the flaming sword and the tail working in the squad, I think it works.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
Especially with the kind of muted brown shades for the leather. The kind of all the attention is drawn to the accent colors, which are the kind of almost purplish pinkish robes, but it's like that kind of shade of red, the flaming swords, and then the teal, and then these two elements those three elements I guess can work together. Whereas if you had another color on the shoulder pads, like if those shoulder pads were white,
it would be too much.
It would
be
too much. It'd be too loud. Yeah.
Loud is the right word. Yeah.
Especially considering that on the color wheel, the color of the swords is directly opposed, contrasting to that teal. And so if you mixed another color in there as an eye catch, it would be way too loud. It would be too noisy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look at this guy referencing color wheels.
You got a pro in here.
Awesome. Yeah, I have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm just making it up as I go, man. I like it. So it's good.
Yeah, it's good.
This is awesome. Nice job, Baba. So next up, we have another honorable mention from Mortis. Mortis has actually submitted to our painting contest in the past and does excellent work. Has a very, very distinct color scheme. As soon as you see that teal armor, you know it's a Mortis made Stormcast. Because I don't know anybody else that paints teal, black with green metal and then pink accent color, like on blades and things like that. It's such a distinct, cool color scheme.
Oh yeah.
It's like 80s cyberpunk kind of vibes. It's really awesome. And I wanted to zoom in here, so I got this extra close-up photo of just how much work he puts into the armor. He chips it, he does grime, excellent, very smooth transitions on colors. You can see like the hip plates aren't just monochrome; they are actually a transition from darker to lighter. So it's like a non-metallic metal kind of thing, but then it's also weathered down severely. So in addition to it being a very very distinct color scheme, it also is very well done.
Yeah.
And then the base just ties it all together, because if you had these guys on like some brown base, just wouldn't look as good. But the gray stones, the pink and purple bushes, the green bushes, man, this just, it really fits together.
Yeah, it's it's so uniquely Mortis with the alien grass. Oh, it's really good.
See, now this, continuing on our previous discussion, this might be a place where you add one more color. So for example, maybe like the hair color could have been like a red or something to, I don't know. We can ask the color wheel guy for a good pick. Maybe an orange might have been the right pick based on the bases.
Teal. Let's see. What goes well with teal? I think teal goes with black, white, magenta. It can go with orange. I'm not entirely sure. I remember black, white, magenta off the top of my head. So
Yeah.
You guys
white
just
could have
know
been a
this?
color, but white. They already have white.
How do you guys just know this? That's crazy.
I
Lots
used
of
to look up color
experimenting.
wheel stuff a lot, like
Yeah.
for complementary colors, for like what, because I was thinking, because my units aren't all painted the same. I paint like certain chamber units certain ways.
Okay. I got to do more research apparently before I paint. But yeah, I think maybe like some orange hair might push it, because it's a little too tony, because the black is a very subdued color. It doesn't add anything, so all you have here is pink and teal. And I think a third color would go a long way here.
I don't know. I think this is fine. I mean, other than maybe like they could have done. I see the shoulder pads have like this off-white, almost like bone-like coloring on the lightning bolt. Maybe that could be like a brighter white to like make it stand out, and like white could complement teal. But I think overall it's fine. I don't think it needs more. It's already like loud as it is. Like I don't necessarily think we need to.
Oh yeah, it's just like nitpicking here, like tiny things
Oh, yeah.
that
Oh,
I'd
yeah.
like to see.
I get it.
It's gorgeous.
Great.
Absolutely
Yeah.
gorgeous.
No, the word is this is pretty phenomenal.
Yep. Really good work. Especially, you can even see he did the gradient on the teal on the banner as well, but unlike our previous entry, instead of doing it around the Sigmar icon, it's kind of towards the bottom of it,
Yeah.
which is an interesting choice. It's kind of like a large open flat area, so I'm not 100% on that part of it. But it makes sense. If it's a flat area, it would catch more light. Cool. Really, really cool. All right. So first up, our third place winner is going to be Hulkamania with this entry again. Black armor, red robes. It's going to get you at least a point, and a lot of people really, really like this one. The blue blades are an excellent choice. Red robes on black armor look great. The bases are very distinct. It's like a desert almost, with these little bushes. Like, what's going on there? That's really cool. Really thick edge highlighting, which I personally don't mind that, because when you're looking at a tabletop view, it's very, very distinct. Like when you're looking close up, you can tell they're a little bit thicker than what some other people might do. But I actually don't mind that. A lot of my Stormcast I purposefully painted with thick edge highlights, because when you're looking from the tabletop down, it's very distinct. You can see there's tiny little cross hatchings across the cloaks as you go down, just adding a little bit of brightness. Yeah.
Good mix of helmetless, non-helmetless. Yeah, good detail on the faces. Really nice. He might have. I might be wrong, but I think he instead of going for the because if you look at the other power swords we've looked at, they went for like the gradient, like the glazing, the gradient on there. This one, he's gone for contrast. Like this might be like Talisar blue or Aethermatic blue on lead belt.
Or it could be like
I think it's Talisar. Aether is a lot brighter. It's a lot lighter shade, because that's what I use.
I was gonna guess that it was Guilliman glaze over some kind of silver or lead.
Yeah, they're fairly similar. Talisar and Guilliman glaze are fairly similar.
Yeah. It's actually got 2 primes in this unit, I just noticed.
Does it? Oh yeah, no. Which one?
The shoulder pads.
Oh yeah, there's 3.
No, just 2.
No, two.
No,
Two. Never mind.
just the 2.
The poses. Yeah. Oh yeah. He just used the prime shoulder pad, but he didn't. Oh yeah. Yeah. Wow. Interesting.
And they're not
Interesting.
gold, so they can
It's
be
hard-
whatever he
That's
wants.
true. It looks great.
I guess you tell by the sword because the prime sword has that intricate like design on it with
Yeah.
that dome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good work on the hair, especially around the faces. I really like that. There's a distinct point where you can see the beard stops and the face begins. A lot of times, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but when I paint hair, I have a problem with that. I always like overpaint, and then I can't do recess shading properly because of the way the models are formed. There's nowhere for it to pool. So it's almost like, okay, so now I have to go in with like a really tiny pencil brush and put a dash of color that's darker in there. It's a pain. So I don't know if it's the models, but I just wanted to point that out, that's not an obviously easy thing to do, to have that kind of nice, clear distinction between face and hair.
Yeah, I really the cross hatching on the robes was really indicative of me of painted on texture to show that the robes are wearing thin, since these guys have been out in the wilds, their armor's all chipped and whatnot. I thought that was a really, really good touch.
I hadn't considered it that way. Yeah, it looks like it's weathering away. That's cool.
Yeah.
These guys have been fighting for a while. Okay, well, congratulations, Hulkamania. We will be contacting you on Discord to discuss getting you the prize. And second place goes to Andreas SCE, a previous winner of a painting contest on the Stormkeep. Andreas does phenomenal work, excellent, just technically excellent, very proficient painter. I wanted to zoom in on the central model, the prime there, just because from the left photo it might not be obvious, but all of this is non-metallic metal, this gold.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful, and especially he even bothers doing it on the little details, like the knee pads are so intricately detailed with this non-metallic style, and it contrasts beautifully from the cobalt blue armor, which is done like flat, not as a non-metallic style. It really makes that gold pop so much. And then all of that is laid on top of this really beautiful ceramic color that he does for weapons and banners and things like that. And you can actually see there's a transition on the blade on the right from a black to the ceramic, which is interesting. It's a really interesting choice. Maybe it's just the shadow, though. Now that I think about it, it's probably just the shadow.
Yeah, I love the Wraithbone blades. It's like a page out of the Aidna Deepkin book. They have a guide on there on how to do that. Normally don't see a lot of that in Stormcast, but it goes really well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're fantastic. And purple on black, 2 thumbs up. 2 thumbs up.
Yeah.
Well, it's blue.
Definitely.
It is blue. It is blue. Yeah, it looked black when I looked at it on my laptop.
Oh yeah. Really nice.
The purple and blue are really similar here, and I think that works because the main colors here that pop out, the like active elements, are the white, the gold, and the blue. So it's fine that the purple is kind of muted. It doesn't need to stand out. Like the other models we've seen, the cloaks have been an accent feature. Here they're kind of a subdued element, but they're still definitely awesome. I mean, look at the excellent shading done on that knee for the prime. Just the way the cloak, it actually looks like a cloak would look if you have an armored knee plate underneath it. It looks fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I didn't even see that. Oh my god.
Yeah.
That's really good. Man, Andres is always.
Also went for no helmets. Brave choice.
Well, I mean, if you've got the skill to do this good, go with no helmets. I'm right with you, Paul. All of my Stormcast do not go into battle without their head bucket.
It's just a good way to get sniped, man. You know, you're...
Not because we can't paint faces.
There's this great story in 40k about a Tau commander who's talking to another Tau commander about the Space Marines. Totally off topic, but I'm going to tell it anyway. And these two Tau commanders are like, these guys are idiots. Like their leaders are just running around out there without helmets. So I could just jump from leader to leader. I know which one the leader is, and I'm just going around popping them off one at a time. Like, they're stupid. What are they doing?
Well, over there at least they have like a lower reason. Like all the captains have the force shield, like the halo, whatever, the iron halo, I think it's called. So apparently, yeah, but I mean it's only a 4-up and vulnerable save. So I guess he's shooting them when they're missing that 4-up. So who cares?
And I guess they happen to always be fighting wherever you can breathe. Or do Space Marines need to breathe? I think they have to breathe, right? Yeah. Okay, I'm not a Space Marine.
I have no idea.
So Andreas also does this cork thing, and he does a really good job with the cork. But you can still see, you can tell it's cork, even if you put like tufts on it and little stones to accent it. Just the flat plane is the downside of using cork. And I think maybe like some bricks on top of this might help break it up. Also want to point out the purple gems look gorgeous. They're actually way more detailed than you think. Like the zoomed in, you can see just how much detail went into those tiny little purple gems, which looks really, really good. Even the lightning, even the Redeemer symbols on the shoulder pads are done in that non-metallic style, and it just looks fantastic.
Yeah.
Love it.
Talented boy.
Andreas, great work. Fantastic.
Yeah.
And you would have won if not for the next contestant, which was Trishula. Trishula? We're gonna go with that. Which this photo doesn't just wait for it. All right?
Wait for it.
Bam. Look at that. Look how cool that looks. This was such a freaking awesome concept. This like lava bursting from underneath with glow in the dark weapons, and not just the weapons, but the eyes too. This is like dark Stormcast. Like this is the version of Stormcast you don't want to see. Oh man, this is fantastic. Such a cool concept.
It's great. And don't misunderstand. There was a prolonged argument in our Discord about which one of those was going to win.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, it was fairly close, I think.
Yeah,
it was really close.
Cool rules always, like cool concepts, I think beat technical skill in terms of overall appeal, especially when it's something unique like this. You don't see this every single day. I mean, if you're on Instagram, you might see it every single day. There's enough people doing it, but it's really awesome to see it. And fantastic work. This glow in the dark paint, it's something I kind of want to experiment with, because it's kind of just like a flat blue panel. And I wonder if there's ways to work with that glow in the dark paint. It's definitely a product I want to look into. And I don't know how practical these. I'm just going to go back to the previous slide. Looking at how thick the bases are. I don't know how practical that is for a standard game, but the effect is so cool that maybe it doesn't matter if it's practical. Maybe they're just cool models, and that's all you need to know.
I think it's practical enough. It just like means you can move your models easily. Usually, like I tend to pick up the model and buy the model, but the base is that big and thick that you can just use the base, pick it up, and do whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a problem at all.
They get shot this year though.
I once saw, I can't remember what it was. Someone had mounted their Archaon on like a huge like castle. So their Archaon was quite literally like about as big as my torso. So like, you could like, you had a great time moving it.
Line of sight, never heard of it.
Yeah, just line of sight. Bro, I'm 20 wounds.
Well, and I mean, it's also entirely possible that for actual gameplay, now that the contest is over, Trisha could probably just pop the base tops off that LED stand and cut the wires out of it and just leave them on the base. Don't get me wrong. Anyone who turning those on and putting them on the table is going to score points no matter where it goes. But yeah, I love it. I think it's great.
The only problem with glow in the dark paint is that you never play a tournament in the dark. It's not practical for gaming at all. You'll never even play a game in the dark. But it just looks so cool in pictures, and the idea of having like maybe you can set this up where you have like a corner of the table is dark, so that anytime you have a glow in the dark model move in there, I don't know, if you want to get really fancy with your lighting, you could do something like that. So cool. It's given me those Star Wars Episode 3 vibes, It's definitely got the high ground.
I have the high ground.
They do have the high ground, right? Like, it's fantastic.
They do.
Fantastic. Trishula, we will be in touch, and you'll get your first choice of the prizes, and we will find a way to get them to you. So congratulations to all of our winners, and honestly, everybody who entered. It sucked having to cut it down to only a few honorable mentions just for time, because it is a live stream. We don't have infinite time. I would have loved to talk about every single entry if we had more time.
Yeah, they were all good. It's
such a cool unit. it just always looks good. All right, so let's dive on in to the other topic of today, which is internal versus external balancing. And I guess we can start with talking about what is internal balancing. We throw this term around a lot, and I want to be clear about what we mean by this. So internal balancing is how units are compared to each other within the same army. So how does a Stormcast unit compare to another Stormcast unit? How does a Seraphon unit compare to another Seraphon unit? And that's the end of the discussion. That's just internal balancing. And it's considered to have good army internal balancing when you have a lot of different options. Like Stormcast right now have really, I would say, some of the best internal balancing. Like we have some bad units, sure, but we have so many options. We have so many different melee units, so many different shooting units, so many different fast units we can use, screening units. Our heroes are kind of pile of junk, but what can you do, right? But we still have tons of options. A lot of our sub-factions are good. So Stormcast are generally considered to be a good internal balance. Could be better, but it's still good. Whereas armies that are mono build, so like you just see the same list over and over and over every time you face them in a game, those are poor internal balancing because there's only one unit that's good. Everything else is considered not viable. So an example of this would be maybe not this edition, but definitely last edition, Daughters of Cain. They were a mono build army. There was one Daughters of Cain list. Everybody used it. Oh, you're playing Daughters of Cain, you know exactly what you're up against. Within, maybe a couple of units get swapped here and there, but for the most part, the core of the list was the same. You had Marathi and then bow snakes,
15 bow snakes,
and a cauldron, and that was it. That was the list, right? So,
yep,
yeah.
And I mean, you could say the same for like when you say internal, like Iron Jaws. Even though the roster isn't that big, it's like I don't know, it's like 3 units or 4 units, and then a bunch of heroes. You can tell what the obvious choice is. Pigs. Like they're not out there playing anything else most of the time. Some of them will include a unit of art boys for some light screening, but for the most part, the real discussion is one Makrasha or double Makrasha. Not should we run pigs or not. I think everyone will run.
The discussion for Iron Jaws is how many of this thing do I bring, not which things do I bring. So that's a sign of poor balance for sure. And we've thrown this term around, viable. Like, how is a unit considered viable? Well, a unit is viable, in our opinion at least, if it has a thing that it does, and it does it reasonably well, and no other unit in the book or army, let's say, can do it better for roughly the same point cost. Because sometimes a niche it's the cheapest unit. It's the cheapest battle line. That's a niche. Some units are good just because they are the cheapest battle line. It's not a great niche because it's not interacting with the game in any meaningful way. Maybe it doesn't represent what the models are doing. Like 2nd edition Liberators had that problem where it was like they were the best choice because they were the cheapest and everything else was just garbage. Like there's no reason to use Sequitors when you could just use Liberators and save points. But that didn't make Liberators fun to use or thematically appropriate, and it just felt bad. So that was pretty poor internal balance. And it wasn't that Liberators were good. It's just that everything else was expensive. Too expensive for that role. You could perhaps argue that Stormcast, some of the units we have are so good that they're overshadowing others. Like in the comments here, Noah mentions dragons, raptors, and fulminators. I think when the book first came out, that was the perception. But as we played more games over the past, it's been a year, guys.
Yeah, I would disagree. Yeah, and we're gonna point out an example. So I'm sorry, Noah. Yeah, I think we're gonna talk about how our internal balance is actually dedicated. There is a brand of Raptor that we're going to talk about as an example of bad internal balancing, but it's not the Raptor youth. It's not the line. So yeah.
What a unit can be considered viable for a number of reasons. Sometimes they just do a ton of damage. Sometimes they have, a unique ability that nothing else in the army can bring. Sometimes it's just the cheapest unit. Sometimes you can stack a whole bunch of allegiance abilities on a single unit, and that makes that unit good. Now that's a little bit risky because if you have a combo that's too powerful, that becomes the only way to play the game. Another classic example of this was Stormcast in 2nd edition, Anvils of the Helden Hammer with 9 long strikes. That was the only way to play the game for Stormcast. Everything else was not viable. That was the only viable path. So there's a bunch of different ways you can have viable units. And Wombat mentions chariots. Chariots are great. They're not like the best at anything, but they're just good at everything. They're really, really good. Fantastic unit.
And they're dirt cheap for what they do.
Yep, 165 for that profile.
I don't think they're dirt cheap. I think for a unit that is not elite and can't command itself, can't issue commands at all, that has to have some support. But I mean, that's the thing. It's like a jack of all trades unit, but it's not great at anything. And sometimes that's exactly what you need.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's a good niche to have. It's fast enough. Like if it was 10-inch move, I maybe wouldn't consider it. If it was 10 wounds instead of 12, I maybe wouldn't consider it. If it was a 4-up save instead of a 3-up, maybe wouldn't consider it. If it
There's not that many units that can be screens, space deniers, mortal wounders, decent at combat, and fast. Like that's just that's 5 different niches in one. Not that many units in our army can reasonably occupy.
Yeah, and the charge mortals too, right? Like it's got good damage on top of all of that, so it's pretty good at everything that you want a unit to do. But it's not a specialized unit, which means it doesn't get included as like a first pick, unless you're playing Silver Chariots, which is a super fun list. Everybody should play that list. It's super fun. It's got 4 Chariots and Gardas, and it's just really annoying to kill. Sometimes a unit can be too good, and it overshadows the rest of the army. Croak in 2nd edition for Seraphon was so good that every single list started with Lord Croak and an Astrolith Bearer, and the list kind of just built itself from there because you put in Salamanders and you're just done. Your list is full. So that happens. It happens a lot. It's really, really easy to have a unit that's just a little bit too good for its points, and then everybody's like, oh, well, I'll just bring more of that. I'll bring more pigs. I'll bring more Salamanders. I'll bring more bow snakes. I'll just bring as many of this thing that is costed effectively. And that can ruin the internal balancing.
Mm-hmm.
So let's look at an example of good balancing, which is currently Stormcast shooting. We have 3 completely different shooting. We have multiple shooting units. We have more that we haven't mentioned here on this slide. But we have 3 that are really, really good, and they all have distinct roles, and they're costed in a way that is great. So long strikes, they're super long range. They're pretty high damage, and they're also pretty accurate, and they do mortal wounds. But they are the most expensive. They're not battle line, and they are fragile. They are only 6 wounds for 240 points. So they have a distinct high range, high damage niche, but it comes at a strict downside of being incredibly fragile, and they need to be protected. Whereas Judicators come in squads of 5, which means they have more wounds and more bodies. Bow Judicators in particular are kind of like a downgrade from Long Strikes in terms of your trading offense and for defense. You give up 6 inches of range, you give up 2 mortal wounds on 6 instead of 1, you give up a point of rend, and you give up 1 to wound, but you get tons more wounds. You also get battle line, which means you're a veteran, which means you can sit there and hold proving grounds that a long strike couldn't. You can rally the unit back because you can double reinforce them and try to rally some points back over time, and that's a really interesting difference between these units. They're similar enough in terms of damage output, that in terms of damage per point, that it's not the biggest deal. It's just a matter of, well, do I want to specialize a little bit more in damage and range, or do I want a bit more defense? And then crossbow judicators are higher damage output than long strikes, because per model they're 4 shots apiece, which means they're going to do overall more damage than long strikes. They're a little bit cheaper. They're battle line, so they've got all the best parts of bow judicators, and then all the damage of long strikes, even more damage. In fact, if you've watched other episodes of our podcast, crossbow judicators are the highest damage output shooting in our army, but they're short range and they have no rend. So they're only 18 inches and they have no rend. But if you can get around those downsides, they're a fantastic unit. They've got all the advantages of both units rolled into one. And all 3 of these are viable picks. You can make a competent list with any of these and feel really good about it.
Yeah, and all these have their specific niche. You go from range, whether they have battle line status or not, how many wounds they have. So as Noah brought it up, one of the shooter that doesn't fit into this good internal balancing are the Vanguard Raptors with Hurricane. Because if you look at the model of how they separated bow judicators and long strikes, who I think are like cousins in the same balancing dance, they separated them by giving long strikes a better 2 wound roll, 6 inches of range, and then an extra damage. What is the differentiation between crossbow judicators and Vanguard Raptors with Hurricane Crossbows? The answer is there is none. Crossbow judicators is just better in every way. Because they have the same range, they have the same 2 hit and 2 wound, no rend, 1 damage. Vanguard Raptors with Hurricane Crossbows have, I think, 12 shots total versus the 8 you will typically get in a 5-man crossbow judicator squad. But right now the damage comparison to those is not even the same. Crossbow Adjudicators just outperform them. So Vanguard Raptors at 230 with Hurricane Crossbows makes no sense.
Yeah.
The way they are, just to point them internally, we would have to point them below crossbow at 180.
Yeah, they'd have to be about 180, and that even assumes you can make up for the battle line somewhere on your list. One of the reasons crossbow adjudicators and bow adjudicators are so good is because you don't have to spend 115 points on a squad of liberators to fill a battle line slot. And Stormcast are not an army that wants to spend more battle line slots than needed. We want to be as efficient and trim as possible.
Yeah, I wouldn't take them for 180. I don't know if I would take them at 160. Like
in a vacuum, I agree.
An argument at 160, I could see it like as a horde clear. Like I'd include it in like some lists at 180, but I'm not spending 230 for like a dedicated crossbow unit. I might as well be spending I'm not spending 230 for a crossbow. I'm spending I'm taking bow.
Bow adjudicators, absolutely every time.
There's no like. They could have done so much with the Hurricane Crossbows. They could have made them wound on 2s. They could have given them better range. They could have given them -1 rend when the bow adjudicator crossbows don't have any. And they choose to not do any of that, which makes me think they don't really want you to play this. I'm like,
Wombat Tau in the chat, the list I was talking about earlier is called Silver Chariots. It's in our archetypes section of our Discord, which are just like a series of unit combinations for Stormcast. It uses 4 chariots, and I believe we use crossbow adjudicators as the shooting hammer in that list, along with Gardas.
Yeah, 15. Yep. With Gardas, Incanter, and Relic.
Yeah. Starkpister. Sorry, what was that, Marco?
Also uses Vanquishers and Liberators and some Geminids to help out the crossbow. Really good list.
It's super fun. I don't know how competitive it is yet because I haven't had a chance to playtest it yet, but 4 chariots is really fun to run, especially with Gardas giving them all 5 aboard. They're just so durable. It's gross. Starkpister, there's Castigators too. They're an example of just like Hurricane Raptors. They're just so close to being viable. You'd have to drop their points significantly though before you consider them.
You would have to go back to their 2.0. Like they're 105, they would have to be like 85 or 90, 85 points.
Mm-hmm. And then you get into a problem of, well, now it's so cheap. What if you just spam it? Right? Now that's an entirely different problem. So that's not an issue necessarily you can solve with points. But we'll get into that. That's
let's talk about it. Let's go into points or like more about internal balance.
Yeah, more internal balance stuff. So real quick here, some and we can debate these. These are just my opinions. Armies with good internal balancing. So Stormcast, lots of sub-factions are viable, lots of units are viable. Different kinds of units are viable. You can play really fast lists, really shooty lists, really slow defensive lists. You can have mega threat ranges or super short threat ranges. A bunch of different heroes are viable. Not as many as I would like, given that we have like 30 heroes and maybe 5 of them are good, but we still have five good heroes, right? That's a lot of variety. So Stormcast, I think, definitely have good internal balancing. Seraphon are definitely... Sorry?
Yeah, for 70 plus War Scrolls, it's they've definitely really tried in this, and it works. It works pretty well.
It as a percentage, we're maybe like half the book is good and viable, which isn't ideal, but like that's still 40 War Scrolls almost. Like that's really good. That's a lot of variety.
Yeah, there are entire armies that don't have that many War Scrolls, so we're doing good.
Mm-hmm.
We're fine. Yeah. This is just like we said, nitpicking on
and we have 6 sub-factions that are viable out of 8. Like it sucks that 2 are bad, but 6 of them are good. Like that's awesome.
Mm-hmm. 6 out of 8. What?
Yeah, we have 8 sub-factions and 6 are good.
What?
Anvils.
What's the other one?
Warbringers.
Oh, okay.
It's just like it's okay. It's not as bad as Anvils, but it's like
that's fine.
I don't put it up there with like Celestial Vindicators. It's a difference.
No, Celestial Vindicators is pretty good. I've been trying some.
It's good. Yeah. Seraphon I think have good internal balance. Lots of different units are viable. I think the change to the Coalesce Scaly Skin has actually increased the viability of units like Saurus and Stegodons and Bastillodons with the Ark of Sotek now are seeing play, whereas previously they never saw play. I don't know if that's a points thing or just rules changes, maybe a combination. But Seraphon seem to have good internal balance. When you play against a Seraphon player, you have no idea what they're going to do. Like there's no standard Seraphon list.
I don't know, man. Okay.
There's a slan in almost every list. I'll give you that.
So the core of the list I almost always know is going to be Slan, and like the skink priest. I don't know their names, but like the 3 different skink priests or whatever.
Not always. Not always. It depends on what you're trying to do, right? Like if you've got a big skink blob, then you'll bring the Star Priest for sure because you want the mortal wounds on 6s. But if you're running a bunch of Stegodons and Bastillodons, if you're going Monster Mash with Salamanders, then the skink Star Priest doesn't really offer much. So he's not an auto pick.
I guess you could say that if you're talking about them having good internal balance in Starborn versus Coalesce, then sure. But
that's a part of it.
I can reasonably predict what's going to be in each list. If I'm seeing a Thunder Lizard list, I'm seeing more Bastillodons, Engine of the Gods, and things like that. If I'm seeing more Starborn, I'll see a block of 30 skinks and like 2 units of reinforcement.
But you'll still see big skink blobs in Coalesced. You'll still see Saurus Knights in Starborn. Like there's a lot of cross play. You'll see Pterodons in both. You'll see Stegodons in both. You'll see Bastillodons in both. Salamanders and Razordons.
Sure.
Lots of different hero options are viable.
I never really see Saurus part C play. These days I'm not even seeing Carnosaurs even C play. People were trying them because they made them so cheap. They made them like 230 points or 220, something crazy like that. But yeah.
There will be a time for Carnosaurs again, I think. I
hope. I hope. Seraphon just has a lot going for it. There's not a single phase in the game where they don't compete in. Yeah. So,
and they have a lot of variety in how they do it too. They can deep strike, teleport. They can summon. They can have really super durable monsters, and Croxagores even are seeing play now, which is awesome. Like there's just a lot going on with Seraphon, and that's good internal balance.
Yeah,
maybe too powerful, but good internal. Sorry, I keep interrupting.
No, that's fine.
Cities of Sigmar. Cities of Sigmar has good internal balance, right? Like a bunch of different subfactions are viable. A bunch of different unit combos are viable based on different subfactions. Like anytime we talk about Cities of Sigmar, it's always like, oh, are you talking about Living City or Tempesti or Hallowheart or Phoenicium? Even makes the cut sometimes.
Yeah.
Gits have good balance. It's a really low bar, but everything seems good.
It's all equally not great.
But yeah, you can play Squids, you can play Trogs, you can play MoonClan, you can play a bunch of different heroes. Like you can play a bunch of different stuff with Gits. Maybe part of it is that they don't have subfactions, which tilt power towards units. Like for example, Night Haunt, which we're about to talk about, and that opens up more options because you're not like, oh well, I have to play this subfaction because it has this ability and I need that ability. So Gits, good internal balance, surprisingly, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Night Haunt, I think before Season 1 started, had much better internal balance, but you still see a lot of variety in Night Haunt. I mean, every list has a Cruciator, every list has a Guardian, every list has Blade Geist now.
We talk about how good Blade Geist and Scarlet Doom is, but the internal balance also is fine. Like, you can have a great amount of success just running X-Rays and your Grimghast Reapers in like an Emerald Coast.
Totally.
They even made Harridans viable in like a good sense, like ignoring wards entirely. I think Night Haunt actually have pretty good internal balance. With their
the thing.
Go ahead.
The thing with Night Haunt right now is we're seeing that the Blade Geist list because of the General's Handbook. When the General Handbook rules change, I think a lot of people will pivot away from that.
Right, but I don't think we can say a faction has like good or bad internal balance based on the seasonal requirements.
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the reason we're seeing that all the time is because of the General's Handbook, not because it's a better subfaction.
I think Night Haunt is perfectly like it's like one of the books where like the book was really, really bad in terms of internal balance. You had too many units doing the same thing, and now they've made like clear like distinct sections or areas where the units can operate. And that's wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we'll see what happens with Night Haunt, right? There's a lot of variety, which is great, and I think it's fine that seasonal rules can impact internal balance, right? Like Vanquishers feel freaking great to use. Like nothing in Season 1 has made Stormcast feel worse in any way. Everything that was good is still good, aside from the things they nerfed, right? That's not seasonal. That's a permanent change. And the season just opened up new options, and I think that's really good.
Yeah.
Ideneth, to me, feel like an army with good internal balancing. Like when we were writing our Ideneth review that never got published, we like everything's like A tier in this army. Like everything seems good. There's nothing. There's no clear must-have units. Like you can build eels, you can build sharks, you can build a turtle, and build reavers and then thralls. Like all of the options seem good in their own way.
Yeah. I mean, like obviously, once you get down in the weeds with like the top IDNet players, they would like argue about what's good and where. But from a general standpoint, everything has its niche and everything can be built around. It's not so much like it was last season. Like if you're not building eels, you're doing it, or eels or sharks with the new war scroll that they got in one of the Broken Realms or something.
Right.
But yeah, everything in INET seems very viable.
Also worth mentioning, lots of sub factions that are worth playing. Really cool sub factions in that army.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Sylvaneth, I have a question mark next to this one because it seems right now that they have good internal balancing, but I see a trend happening with Sylvaneth where every list has to have 6 Kurnoth Hunters with scythes, because otherwise you don't have the damage to kill anything in the game. And every list seems to need the Spell Singer War Singer combo. And I don't know, and I think because those two things seem so necessary, is that poor internal balance? Like, is there a path forward for Sylvaneth from that?
Okay, so I don't agree necessarily because, so 2 reasons. One, the Spellsinger trait is really broken because they haven't FAQ'd it yet. I'm sure what they really meant was that kind of works like Umbral Spell Portal where you can put 1 spell through it, but right now you can put 3 spells through it. So it's just one of those things where it's winning out because it's just like a non-fixed thing that people can just spam. And they're very reliant on it, but they don't really feel like exploring anything else because why would you? If I get Lightning Blast, something like the whole opponent's army through a Wildwood, but outside of Unbind range, I probably would.
Yeah.
The other thing is, yes, I think people are very dependent on 6 Kurnoths, either with swords or scythes, depending on whether you like Mortal Wounds or more Rend or not. But my question is, like, this is a faction where I guess they don't, like, when you think about hammer units, we have so many of them, so I guess in that sense we can be biased because I think of, like, Annihilators, I think of Fulminators, I think of Tempestors, I think of Stormdrake Guard. They just don't have that many options. Like,
that's what I'm saying, right? Is the lack of options a sign of poor internal balancing? Because you can play Kurnoth Scythes very differently in very different lists, but if every single Sylvaneth list has 500 points spent on this unit, isn't that a sign that maybe things aren't so great in terms of internal balance?
I don't necessarily agree. I think like for me, it's like a how our lists start with like a Lord Relictor and I don't know Liberators. Like we're always have 300 points of our list sort of pre-decided before we do anything else. In a lot of our lists,
that was definitely true before they nerfed Thunderbolt Volley. Every Stormcast list was a big shooting block, 600 points or so, and Thunderbolt Volley. But it's totally opened up since then.
Right. I just view it as it's just a necessary requirement they have to make. Now there might be Sylvaneth lists that drop that and maybe lean more into the new Lancers or maybe more into monsters like Tree Lord spam, or maybe they're more battle line units to try and play the objective game alongside their good magic. But it's fine, I think. Like I don't think it's a problem that it starts with a block of 6 Kurnoth. The Kurnoth themselves, I think within themselves are pretty well balanced.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I was going to say. Like if Sylvaneth players don't take Kurnoth Hunters, what melee hammer unit are they taking?
They're not, and that's kind of what I'm getting at.
Exactly,
that's the point.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like if you were saying that, why aren't they taking swords or why aren't they taking XYZ? I think that would be a example of poor internal balance if Kurnoth Hunters with size were like just like the obvious choice. But you do see Sylvaneth players switching up their hammer. Some will go for the 6 bows, some will go for the 6 swords, some will go for the 6 sides. I think that's fine. It's no different than us picking our flavor of Dracoth and running.
Right. I'm specifically seeing that 6 sites feel necessary, and I could be wrong about that. That's my initial impression of the book. It's only been a few months. It seems like if you have 6 swords, or if you have 6 swords has got some issues with coherency. 6 bows isn't doing enough damage. It's not like long strikes. 6 long strikes do way more damage than that. 6 sights are the only way to really punch through anything that's save stacking. Like how do Sylvaneth kill 4 Stormdrake Guard with Gardas and Castellan unless they have those Rend 3 sights attacking twice probably to kill them? Like it's so hard for them to kill anything, especially things that can ignore spells.
It's a board control game. They have to try and snipe Gardas with their magic, using something they have to basically use Strike and Fade to the fullest advantage because it's the one thing we can interact with. Like that's the thing they have going for them, maybe, and that's what makes them so elite. Where you have, they have 6 Kurnoth that they can start it, but it's a thing that can just go out with their what's that spell called? The Hive or whatever that gives them +3 to charge.
Yeah,
I think on a 2-up, they just keep using that and use a hit and run tactic, and they can realistically do that with any hammer. I think the sides are winning right now because save stacking was the meta for a while, and I think Gargants are still a problem for Sylvaneth because without the sides, they're not chewing through Gargants.
Right, that's what I'm getting at, right? Is like for a while we thought fulminators would be that, and then we found different alternatives. We found we can have enough damage without fulminators. I don't know if Sylvaneth could do that. I think they're going to be stuck with this 6-site thing, not because the book demands it. I think it's because the game itself is saying, well, there's a DPS check, and you're not going to make it unless you have this unit. And that can have an impact on internal balancing as well. The units you choose to use.
I think it's fine. Like, I think the Seekers and the Lancers or whatever are balanced fine. I think their battle line options are balanced really well. Their hero spots are balanced pretty fantastic, actually. They have to actually think about what they're going to take, like what combination they're going to go for. And I mean, the Warsong Revenant currently is the obvious choice, but if the rumors are true about the Battle Scroll, where Spellsinger is going to lose, it's, put 3 spells through Portal on the field, then, that'll open up some more options.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Fair. Okay. Fair points all around. I just wanted to discuss Sylvaneth because I feel like they have a lot of choices. I just wanted to discuss that.
Mm-hmm.
So poor internal balancing. So we talked about good examples. So how about some bad examples? Stormcast have a lot of bad examples. Concussors and Desolators. We talked about this in our unit comparison video recently. They're bad. They're never worth using for any reason. They're always worse than Fulminators. Sometimes even off the charge, they're just strictly worse than Fulminators, which is really disappointing. They're not worth using. That's a really poor thing to have. Retributors, Evocators, and Sequitors are just also strictly worse than other units in the army. Evocators and Retributors are just worse than Protectors and Grandhammers, and even worse than Decimators sometimes. Like, that's rough. Like, when your unit is so bad that Decimators are considered better, that's a rough place to be. And Sequitors are just, like, you're not going to lose the game instantly because they're in your list, but it's like, why are you spending 30 more points on Liberators than you need to? It's kind of the
Hey Paul, did you catch that you put under bad that the Lord Relictor was the bad one, not the Knight Relictor?
Yes, I did catch that.
Okay.
And I'll explain why. The Lord Relictor is too good.
Yeah,
it is poor internal balancing, and I like that the Lord Relictor is as good as he is, but relative to the other units, he is too good compared to the other priests in the army.
Yeah, agreed.
So we have 3 priests. We have the Veritant, the Knight Relictor, and the Lord Relictor. And now it's okay for the Lord Relictor to be at 145 and do what he does, but then the other priests need to be 130 and then 120 respectively.
Yeah.
To give you a more diverse range of choices for priests.
Yeah. So
in my opinion, this goes same for the Arcanums. Oh, sorry, the Knights and the Lord Wizards. Like the Lord Arcanum being at 155, the Knight Incantor being at 125, the Knight Arcanum should be 120 or below, like 115, maybe like the cheapest wizard slot. And I think, and even that doesn't exist. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could carve out niches for these units with small point changes for sure. But I kind of put the Lord Relictor here because it's like, I say Concussors and Desolators are bad, but wouldn't it be fair to say that Fulminators are just too good? And similarly, I can say the Lord Relictor is too bad, but couldn't I say the other choices are just bad? So like, why am I differentiating them in this way? Well, it's because Fulminators feel good to use. It doesn't feel like Fulminators are the problem because compared to other units in the army, Fulminators, well, it's like, okay, I can run Fulminators or I can run Grandhammers or I can run Stormdrakes or Chariots or even Evocators on Draculates. All of these are comparable units to Fulminators, but then Concussors or Desolators are really so closely compared to Fulminators that they just never compete. They're not even worth talking about. It's always just the damage, the melee damage. Dracoths are the Fulminators. The other two don't matter. Whereas the Lord Relictor, sorry, go ahead.
And that's where like Chase was mentioning this in our chat, where they removed a bunch of abilities, and I think that's where they would have differentiated Concussor. Like, you can't build two damage specialized units. Like, they need to have some measure of back and forth against each.
Yeah, there's got to be some distinction. They're too similar in movement and defense and damage in how they do damage. They're just way too similar. One of them will always be better, and it could just come down to points, and that sucks. It sucks when a unit is only good because it's cheaper, but it's better than a unit not being good at all, right? Like if concussors were 190, maybe they'd see play, and that's better than not seeing play. But it's not a very good reason for them to see play. Like I'd rather concussors did something cool that fulminators didn't do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If they still had the like anti-pile-in rule or something, they would be fine. They would be perfect.
That would, from an internal perspective, yeah, they'd be great.
Yeah.
I would consider them. That might be too powerful from an external perspective, though. Like maybe
yes, agreed.
Maybe that's not an ability Stormcast should have, right? Maybe we're strong enough already. So really quickly, I want to touch on Hurricanes. We talked about them, but also Vigilors, Castigators, and Ballista are our ignored shooting units. It's because the other three are so good that these ones just get ignored. However, because we have three really good shooting options that are all distinct, it doesn't feel so bad to have four bad ones, because it's like, well, you know.
No, it feels bad, man. Like I want to play Vigilors. They look so cool.
Sure, but it's not. Yeah. It's not as bad as if you had one good shooting unit and six bad ones. You know, like it doesn't sting as much.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at Nurgle. The Nurgle definitely has poor internal balancing when almost every list, because now there's a little bit of variation coming around, but pretty much every list since the book came out was as many flies as you can fit in a list. And then sometimes you spice it up with a Kron Spy.
or the beasts or whatever, beasts of Nurgle.
Yeah. There's very little variation in Nurgle. It almost feels like a mono build army. There's great players that are doing really cool experimentation with it, but in general, Nurgle is pretty mono build. You can pick the fly sub faction, bring as many flies as you can, and that's a decent list. That's like a 5-0 list even. It's silly. So that's a problem. Iron Jaw is pretty much the same thing, right? How many Maw Crushes do you want? How many pigs do you want? If you bring a list with just Maw Crushes and pigs and ignore the entire rest of the book, you're doing fine. You're going to have like a 3-2, 4-1 experience and feel pretty good about it. Cruel Boys, I think, are in a similar way. Kind of like Gut Rippas aren't great, Hobgrots aren't great, so every list is just using Bolt Boys, something to put in front of the Bolt Boys, a Sludge Raker to buff the Bolt Boys, and Shamans to buff the Bolt. Like every list is Bolt Boys.
It revolves around Bolt Boys, yeah. I've seen a few lists try to run the Mire, like especially after the Grinning Blades Battle Scroll buff. They've tried to run that Troll Boss, but ultimately it will still boil down to the Bolt Boys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Chase, it's definitely because of the speed, right? Like Nurgle, everybody knows Nurgle's supposed to be a slow army, right? They ripped out so much speed from going from 2nd edition to 3rd edition, and then they just kind of snuck it back in at the end with that fly pregame move. If they didn't have that pregame move, or if it was limited to even just one unit, you'd see so much more variety in Nurgle. You'd still see the big blocks of reinforced flies that push up before the game starts, but the whole list wouldn't be flies, and that's such a big difference.
And that's what the onslaught, because in their minds, Stormcast should either deep strike in front of the enemy or just be slow, and we are. But then if you take that away and you give every dragon on the field a pregame move, it becomes pretty ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and again, right? Like, I haven't played against a heavy fly list yet, but I've played against lists with 2 flies and lists with no flies, and the Nurgle army feels perfectly balanced internally to itself because most of it is doing the job it's supposed to. It's the flies spam that feels abusive.
So it's not necessarily like the flies. It's like the pregame move. If the flies don't have that pregame move, like that suddenly doesn't become as oppressive, because what they're doing is they're using Battle Regiment to essentially pin you in with their intense wounds and durability. Yeah. If you take that away and you have ways to get to them before they get to you, then the game's great.
And it's really tragic because Nurgle has a lot of cool stuff that it could be doing, but the fly spam is just so much easier and better. And it's low risk. It's really straightforward. You can do a lot with it. Yeah. Tactically versatile.
It's so cheap, like 220 points for like 16 wounds on 4-up, 5-up.
Yeah.
Like that's insane. That's insanely good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a case where one unit in the book is so good, it overshadows everything else and causes the whole book to have poor balance. Cruel Boys we covered. Daughters of Cain. So I've got a question mark next to this one because our Daughters of Cain review, I was really hopeful that Draichi Ganeth would take off and the Kraith would take off as the premier sub-factions. Are you starting to see it?
Yes.
Really?
Yep.
Yes. So, okay, I think so. Our initial assessment was that we're not seeing a lot of Daughters of Cain lists because it's easier to just build snakes and Moran.
Everyone
It's
has
easy.
that. Everyone has it.
Everyone has it. It's easier to transport, not that many models to paint. The witch elves are like a pain in the butt to paint that many, because we talked about like 50 or 60 witch elves, high gladiatrix, all those little heroes running around. At Nova, Jeremy Wasere ran a list with witch elves and 10 blood. He had a block of like 2 blocks or 1 block of like 10 blood sisters, but he had the high gladiatrix and a bunch of like minimum squad or like 20 witch elf squad and witch elf squads running around. Now he didn't have them in Draichi, he had them in Hagnar. He really wanted that +1 round benefit.
I can see it. We underrated it in our review. I can see the value of fighting with 2 buffed up units at the same time. I missed that in the Hagnar review for sure.
Yeah. So I'm not
Ballard
for that, but yeah, the list exists. It works really, really well.
Good.
Yeah, Jack Ballard from Rerolling Ones is doing a Kraith ladies list. That's
Nice.
a lot of fun.
Kraith, man, go if you guys don't know, like, just go check out our section of the Daughters of Cain book review when we talk about the Kraith. It is the 4+ to win faction. If you ever roll a 4+ with that faction, you just win the freaking game. It's unbelievable, and it wins games without that. It wins games without that, but it's like sometimes you just roll a dice and you win, and that dice is a 4-up. It's a coin flip in addition to all the other good stuff you got going on. It's so good, freaking amazing, and the combat positioning tricks you can do.
Name, I really appreciate Jeremy running it because I've been talking about it. And nobody people were like, "Oh no, Morathi, how do you beat Morathi?" And it's like, well, you just treat your army like a glass cannon. You don't care what dies as long as they die too.
Yep, people are leaning on Morathi like a crutch. So this is the last point I wanted to talk about here. Community perception can skew our perspectives. We think Daughters of Cain, if you ignored the recent events, right, just based off the first few months of the book being out and all of 2nd edition, Daughters of Cain would still be considered an army with poor internal balance. But I think they're about to open up. I think some good players are going to get good results with these seemingly, off the wall kind of tournament lists using a whole bunch of MSU witches that get buffed up to deal infinite damage, and all of a sudden people are going to be like, maybe we don't need Morathi and what's his face, Godric. Maybe we don't have to run that list. Maybe there's more options. So how much is community perception skewing things? We never know, right? But it's something you got to consider. Is like you got to think outside the box. I think if we hadn't started talking about Grandhammers as early as we did, as much as we did, and put up results with them, people would be not. I don't think people would be talking about them.
No, it feels kind of I don't know, better hubris to say it, but it's weird how no one was running them. And even recently, I think Tyler talked about his experience in Nova, and he talked about Nova, yeah. Tyler talked about you have to respect the Grandhammers, or you have to respect Annihilators and their spike up. People just weren't doing that, I guess, because they never saw the 7-inch drop as a threat. They're like, oh, I can screen that out. But what you don't realize is those 3 models are such a small footprint. Because previously, because everyone's faced Gabriel Shorehart at least once, people in AOS who've been playing in 2nd ed. So they're like, oh, I'll screen it out, I'll be okay. But those 3 models are very difficult to screen out. You have to be extremely tight with your movement, and not, it's not always easy to, a lot of people can't.
And also, we are the premier screen killing faction. Between deep strike shooting and teleport shooting and double tap shooting, nobody kills screens like Stormcast.
Yeah.
I feel like I want to make a parody video of that song Gaston sings in Beauty and the Beast. No one shoots like Stormcast, drops from sky like Stormcast. Make a whole thing about it. It'd be great. But people did not respect Grandhammers. And I saw the unit the first time, I was like, okay, so you're telling me this unit has a 7-inch rerollable charge with no command point required, does a whole bunch of mortal wounds on the charge, does 30 damage on 2s and 2s with Ren 2 after doing charge mortal wounds. This unit's insane. How many points is it? 240? Okay. Yes, please. As many as I can get. They're fantastic. But I think it's because Storm Drakes were just so hot, everybody ignored them. There's no reason to look at anything else in the book because you got Storm Drakes right there at 285.
I lean towards I didn't have Grand Hammers, but I had Fulminators, and Fulminators basically perform the same role, just in a different way. And if you look at it, like everyone who's gone up against Fulminators complains about their damage output.
Rightfully so,
But
I would say.
Yeah.
Like,
but Annihilators have roughly the same damage output, and are and in my opinion, easier to use.
I don't know. I think I don't know what causes people to really badmouth Fulminators. I think it's because it's the elite sort of like perception, where it's like Fulminators are like, you know, 1 out of maybe 6 or 7 units in your army, and when they see it delete like a large part of their army, are capable of deleting anything in your army for 230 points, they sort of like lose their minds because nothing in their army in that point range can do that. But then, you know, this is why we're having the chat about internal balance, is because it's not about how good Fulminators are at 230 compared to what's in your army. It's about how internally Stormcasts are pointed to what represents their army as a whole. And we'll talk about it on the next slide, because I think that's the point.
Absolutely. Yep. I'll skip ahead to the point of points, because I think I put it out of order. So the point of points, they are mostly an internal balance mechanism, because that's where we're going with this discussion. Changing the points of a model doesn't change the rules, right? Like when they changed Stormdrake Guard from 285 to 340, that sucked, but Stormdrake Guard were still exactly as impactful the day before as they were the day after. They did the same damage, they moved the same amount. Yeah, you still brought 2 units of Stormdrake Guard, you still spammed Stormdrake Guard. All that changed was the amount that you spammed, or if you were running a mixed unit list, so if you had, for example, a block of 4 Stormdrakes, you had to cut out like a squad of Liberators or something, which sucks. But the Stormdrake Guard did the same damage. They move the same, they do everything the same. All that changes is the list surrounding the Stormdrake Guard. So changing the point values didn't really change how strong Stormdrakes were. All it did was change how much we valued them as Stormcast players. It's like, well, okay, instead of bringing 10, we bring 8 and the Draconis. Or instead of bringing an extra unit of Liberators, we just bring the 4 Stormdrake Guard. So it didn't really change much. It's mostly an internal thing. If Stormdrake Guard were 500 points, nobody would play them. Ever, for any reason. It's too much, right? Like nobody plays Karazai for 600, pretty much for the same reason. Is just there's better choices for the same amount of points. On flip side, if they were 200 points, that's the only unit you'd ever see for the rest of the game. It's like, hey, you guys want to play Age of Stormdrakes? Cool, meet me at the store tomorrow.
Dragons.
and like generally, in terms of impact, you want units to have a ballpark of about the same cost. Right? So like if you have a very high impact unit like Stormdrake Guard, let's say a block of 4 is 680 points, you want them to feel like they're worth 680 points. Similarly, you want other factions to have units so that if they spend 700 points on a single unit, they want it to do 700 points worth of stuff. And that's an important factor. Like that's comparable to Kragnos, right? 4 Stormdrake Guard is about the same cost as Kragnos, so they should be about as impactful as Kragnos is on a battle. Not necessarily the same damage output, not the same movement or durability, just in terms of overall impact on the battlefield. Like that's a threat you got to deal with. And there's all kinds of context you have to factor in, right? Like some units are buffing units, like Kragnos gives other units 3d6 charge, which is insane, but Stormdrake Guard require more buffs on top of that, so there's more to it than just having roughly equal points. And Ragal, do you want to talk about Dragon Ogres, man?
Yeah, so like we mentioned, like, you know, this is the case where points, even though being mostly an internal balancing knob, can bleed into external balance. Dragon Ogres are one of those units that kept getting points decreases because Beast of Chaos was just not a well-written book in terms of its war scrolls, and they got cheaper and cheaper and cheaper to the point where they were pretty efficient for their wounds at, you know, 15 wounds on a 4-up save for 125 points. That's already like pretty good. We're talking about, you know, these are essentially the same cost as Vanquishers with 5 more wounds and better movement, 8-inch movement. And then the White Dwarf update came in, and it gave them a 4-up rally. It gave them an additional point of Ren and -2 Ren starting from Battle Round 3. And that effectively broke them to the point where they're the only thing that Beast of Chaos players are running. Maybe they'll run like a pack of 6 Bulgors or 6 Sangor Enlightened or something to support them. But everyone is starting out with 12 to 15 Dragon Ogres, just a wall of them just running up to you and rallying them back as you shoot them off or try to kill them or whatever. And they also have a hero phase move, by the way. And they heal with the help of a Dragon Ogre Shaggoth, or like I think they have it on their war score. So external balance has now affected internal balance, and then this is why like you can't really like separate the two balance equations together. They have to be tied together to represent like how the army is designed and how it should function.
Mm-hmm.
And like I'm a big proponent of, okay, like I think Draconic Onslaught going away was a good change for the overall health of the game. But if you're going to address the external balance of that unit, then you have to address the internal balance. I don't think that unit is worth 340. I think it's more worth 300. And similarly, I don't think Dragon Ogres with the additional point of Ren and having access to a 4-up rally and being summonable, I think, should be at 125. I think they're closer to maybe 160, 170.
Yep. Well, the point changes for Beast of Chaos, a faction with a 2nd edition battle tome that has bad rules. Even in 2nd edition, they were just bad rules, right? Weak all across the board. The only tuning knob that they decided to play with was the points. So they just kept sliding those points down and down. They kind of took that thing on the Abacus and just kept shifting it until the thing tipped over just enough so that people would care about playing Beast of Chaos, which is like, on one hand, that's good, because I would hate to be a Beast of Chaos player and have the worst book from 2nd edition and then continue being terrible in a whole new edition of the game where everybody else is excited about new stuff. So I think it's good to make an external balance change like that. But it has come at the cost of, well, nothing in the book matters anymore because Dragon Ogres are the unit. There's nothing else that's worth using.
Yeah, and it's like we talked about this in 2nd edition when Stormcast internal balance is just really bad. Like, what happens if they make Liberators 60 points? Well, suddenly Liberators is one of the best units in the game because you can just spam them like nobody's business.
You just bring 200. That's it.
Yeah. Okay, nothing can get through them fast enough.
What a wicked game that would be, too. So much fun for everyone involved.
Yeah.
Right.
So let's talk about external balance. So external balance, as opposed to internal, which is how strong units within the army are against other units in the army. External balance is how strong is this army compared to another army. So how good is Stormcast relative to Seraphon? How good is Khorne? Whenever you hear people talk about a tier list or talking about win rates, that's an external balance thing. It's like, well, how strong is this faction overall? Because you could have the best internal balance ever, maybe like your Gloomspite Gits, where everything is viable, but it could all be trash. Everything is equally trash. So that's not good. You could have, one unit that's winning every game, but that's not very fun to play against, and it's not very fun to play constantly over and over and over. So you kind of need both. Like McGronk, we were saying, you need both. You can't just have good internal balance or good external balance. You need both. And then there's other factors too that we'll talk about later. But you need both of these things for the game to feel good. Mm-hmm. And again, just like with internal balance, external balance can be a combination of things. It can be how strong units are, how fast they are, specific unique abilities they have, how many points they cost can be a thing, what their battlefield role are, stacking allegiance abilities. All these things play into it. So looking at good external balance, I think it's armies like Stormcast, Idoneth, Sylvaneth that have, you can pretty much see it represented in win rates, which are a useful data point. Something like somewhere around the 50% win rate would be considered a good external balance. There's obviously more to it than just looking at win rates at tournaments, but that's a pretty good metric of it. And then some armies with poor external balance, I'd say something like Nurgle, Seraphon are a little bit too high, like they're winning games too frequently. It doesn't matter for this discussion what units they're using to win games. It's just, well, how strong is Seraphon? Well, they're a little bit too strong, right? Not by much. They're not like, crushing every game they win, but they're a little bit doing a little bit too much. Nurgle is with the flies is out of hand, right? Everybody's kind of tired of it at this point. And then on the opposite side, you've got armies that are a little bit too weak. You've got things like Gits or Flesh Eater Courts or Slaves to Darkness. These armies are not pulling in the 5-0s very often. When they do, it's like a really, really good player who also had really good matchups or had really good dice rolls because, dice game, right? So it's not to say that these armies are incapable of winning, just that they're on the weaker side of things, and it's a result of numerous factors. So other factors to consider when you're talking about game balance, comparing units across factions. People do this all the time, and it kind of drives me nuts. And I do it too because you can't not do it. because it's like, well, okay, I've got 700 points of Stormdrake Guard. That should be worth about as much impact on the game as Kragnos. But when you start going into that comparison, you start, well, this unit does 15 damage and this unit does 25 damage, and they cost the same amount of points. So how is this fair? Well, it's like, because there's a lot more context than that. It's how is that army using that unit to do that damage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Grandhammers cost 240, and that's totally fair in a Stormcast army compared to other units that cost around the same amount. But they also have an inheritance tax, and they also require playing Stormcast. You can't play them without Scions of the Storm. So it's totally fine from an internal perspective, and it's totally fine from an external perspective. They don't seem to be dominating the game by any means. So compare that to another 240-point unit, like Kurnoth's.
Sense in a Stormcast army, but that's because it wouldn't make sense in so much, say, like a Soulblight army, because unlike them, we don't have access to 80-point screens. And, cheap disposable things like that occupy a large board space,
right?
And are some. So
yeah, there's a lot of context that goes into it. Like when people were just spamming Stormdrake Guard, a big part of that discussion of when people are trying to figure out is this overpowered or not was, well, they're kind of avoiding the 345-point Liberator tax that a list like this would normally take because they're battling. Maybe that's a part of why they seem to be an overpowered unit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that context is important. Like you could have a unit, let's say Grandhammers were 180 points. Let's just massively cut their cost. But then let's raise the cost of Liberators by that same amount. So Liberators now, all of our Redeemer units, our basic battle line, they all go up to 175 in exchange for Grandhammers going down to 180. So the list stays the same, right?
Yeah.
But how much does that change how much you value different units in the army? A lot, right? So comparing units across factions, like, okay, it's useful. And it's really good to avoid power creep because it's like, well, here's a 300-point unit. I know roughly what a 300-point unit's going to do in the game. If they introduce a new faction with a 300-point unit that is doing way more or way less, it's like I can tell if that's a good or bad unit based on this baseline. And when
there's a really good example of this. So we have something called a Lord Castellan. It's a 155-point model. All it does, it looks at something and it gives it a +1. That's all it does. Normally, what Stormcast players tend to do is give it an Arcane Tome, so it can Mystic Shield in addition and become a source of +2 to save. Now, similarly, Slaves to Darkness have a unit called the Chaos Sorcerer Lord, who is the linchpin of that army right now, the way that book is built. It also just looks at a unit and gives it a +1 save, but is a wizard in addition, so it gets the Arcane Tome for free. Previously, the Chaos Sorcerer Lord was 110 points to 155. And it enabled some interactions that were just so crazy that people were taking like 2, sometimes 3 of them because the unit was just that good. They recently, I think, balanced it to 135, 140 points. Now, not the same as the Castellan, but in that ballpark of like +30, -30 points to accurately reflect its abilities, which is armor stacking and wizard, spellbound.
And now, to be fair, armor stacking is better in Stormcast than in a lot of other armies. Like if, for example, Daughters of Cain had a Lord Castellan, he'd probably only be around 100 points. Well, maybe not Daughters of Cain. Let's say Idoneth Deepkin, right? Like an army that can't really save stack that well. Because Stormcast have multiple ways to stack +1 save, and we have 3+ saves, whereas save stacking on a bunch of 6-up units isn't as valuable.
Doesn't really matter. Yeah, doesn't really matter.
So it's a useful thing to say, well, here's a Lord Castellan at 155, and here's a Chaos Sorcerer Lord. They're both kind of buffing 3-up save dudes. They're both doing similar-ish things. Shouldn't they be similar-ish points? That's fine. That's a fine discussion to have.
Yeah.
The problem is where that discussion goes, well, if this guy's 155 points, and you have to take an artifact that you can only take once to make him a wizard, whereas this guy's cheaper and comes with an artifact already casting spells, and it's a good spell, and all these other things. It's like, well, yeah, but there's context, right? 155 for a Castellan is fair in a Stormcast army. He's maybe a little too much, but people pay it and gladly do because it's very impactful. Whereas 135 for Chaos Sorcerer Lord is also fair, I think, if that's the point cost.
I think it is because you have to consider that they have access to Varan Guard and like 3-up things pretty fairly.
Yeah. So it's part of the discussion. It shouldn't be the only focus. That's all I want to say about the topic of comparing units across factions. It can be fun, it can be frustrating. Just don't let it be the only thing you care about. There's a lot more going on with unit balancing and army balancing than just here's a 100-point unit and here's another 100-point unit. Oh, this one's better, therefore this unit's bad. It's like, no, there's more to it than that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then we talk about the Kronspine problem. So the Kronspine is the best unit in the game, right? Like, if you had to call one unit the best unit in the game, it has to be the Kronspine. It does so much for every faction, and it does so many different things that every faction benefits from it in a different way. Super fragile factions are using it to offset their fragility and just tanking a whole bunch of stuff and using it to get ahead and tie things down, prevent them from retreating and control the board. Whereas factions that are lacking damage are bringing in the Kronspine to be a super punchy, fast flying monster that's also going to buff them. Fast melee armies are using, like, there's just, it's even being used by wizards just to get +1 or to sacrifice the guy that's with it. Like, it does so much, and it's only 400 points. Like, it's too good.
Yeah, it outclasses in most people's rosters when they consider all the hero monsters and behemoths they have access to. It will outclass them in it for its points. It will also outclass anyone else brings. So it's bad from an internal and external balance standpoint, in that it's strong, like, given your own roster and the other person.
Well, but I mean, it's achieving what GW wanted, which was to sell a bunch of boxes of terrain that were just copies of terrain we already had.
Hey, this is the Riptide of AOS. Everybody's going to buy one, and that's just the way it's going to be.
Yep.
Another serious consideration you have to think about when you're talking about game balance is the narrative, right? Like, do the rules that the model has fit the model? And I think that might sound stupid, but I think it's actually the most important thing about this game, because I will play an unbalanced, janky game as long as it's fun and as long as the models look like they do what they're supposed to, right? Like, if Liberators don't feel like a Liberator, it's not fun to play. And then it doesn't matter how balanced the game is. Like, I don't care if Liberators are 60 points and I bring 300 of them. That could not be fun. But if Liberators are just bad, if they're just a bad War Scroll, it's just not a fun unit to use. So, like, the narrative side of things really, really matters. And I think it doesn't get talked about enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's got to have flavor.
Matching the narrative to, like, units recently.
Yeah, like, imagine chariots that aren't fast. Like, if you had a 6-inch move chariot, it's like, what?
Well,
or like a crossbow unit that does no damage and has 12-inch range. Like, who would ever care about this?
Yeah.
I see what you did there, Paul.
It's like, yeah, you're roasting your opponents alive.
It's just bad. And on the flip side, like, instead of being a unit that's really bad, which, that sucks, but what if a unit's too good? What if a god model is in every single list? Maybe thematically that's appropriate, but isn't that still a problem? Because the game's still got to be fun. So even though it might be a flavor win, is it really that Marathi's leading every single Daughters of Cain army? Is that really what's happening out there in the mortal realms? I don't think so. I think she shouldn't be as common as she is. So
I could see that. I could see the argument for god models just being too good. I think for the most part they balance them pretty appropriately in points. Like,
yeah, there's outliers.
Who's like the only problematic one that I can see, is particularly because she has the Iron Heart of Cain. All the god models are above 700 points, 740, 760. Mm-hmm. And to have almost half of your army be a god and then be very restricted on the amount of board space you can occupy.
Oh yeah.
Feels right. Yeah. Now I could see why something like Kragnos might break that aspect, but he's mainly being used in armies that can spam a lot of cheap units but don't actually do a lot of damage. Something like Bones.
I'm a little bit worried about Kragnos because that 3d6 charge is like, it fixes destruction. It patches a hole in that entire Grand Alliance. And I'm worried that, like, how do you design a destruction book that can't take advantage of Kragnos? You know what I mean? It's like, Gargants love the extra mobility, Ogres love the extra damage and mobility, Ironjaws, it can be that extra d6 that they need to get in range. It's just so important for all of these armies. And is it too important? Is it required to have Kragnos now? Are they designing every single unit with the destruction keyword around Kragnos being in that army at some point? It's a real problem, I think, from a design standpoint.
2 months or 3 months or so.
Yeah. And the last consideration, I think the last big one, because I'm sure there's other ones, when you're talking about balancing the game, is it fun? Right? Like I said, the game has to be fun because it's a game at the end of the day. If you're not having fun, it doesn't matter how balanced it is. You could have a perfectly balanced game that is completely thematically appropriate. But if you're not having fun, then there's no point in playing that game, right? Armies that are too weak, not fun. It's not fun to play against them because you feel like you're just picking on somebody. And it's not fun to play as them because you got all these models and you spent time and money putting them together, and you came out to an event and you're just severely handicapped constantly. And that's not very fun. Similarly, if you're too strong, it's just not that fun. I mean, you'll have some kind of fun for a little while. Personally, I grow tired of it. I would get bored of just, constantly beating up people because my army's overpowered. It's just not a good feeling. And definitely not fun to play against, right? Like, nobody likes playing against Nurgle Fly Spam. It's just like, ugh, this again.
Mhm.
That's what everybody thinks.
Yeah.
And armies can be balanced, but they can have mechanics that suck, like Draconic Onslaught or Nurgle pregame move, right? This pin and win off the bat, that sucks. Thunderbolt Volley, here's my 600 points of shooting. It's going to delete 600 points of your army top of round 1, and you can't stop me. You just can't.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
sucks. That's not fun to play against.
Yeah.
That might be what's keeping the army viable in terms of external balance, and it might be drastically shifting internal balance, and maybe these two things are aligned and in harmony because of that mechanic. But if it's not fun to play against, then who cares? Get rid of it. If it's not fun, get rid of it.
I'm shooting, I'm fighting, I'm durable, I have screens, I have summoning. They can be oppressive, in my opinion. It's just that not a lot of people are aware of it, or they don't face Seraphon that.
I think when you learn how they work, you can have really, really fun games against them. I think they're one of the armies that's the most fun to play against, and I compare that to something like Ironjaws, which is just boring to play against. You know what they're going to do. You know how to stop it. It's boring. Even Stormcast is boring to play against because, like, oh, I don't know where you're going to drop in, so I can't predict every single possible thing. I know you're going to shoot me. I know you're going to, like, it's just not that fun to play against Stormcast. Seraphon are fun, though.
I don't have a lot of experience against Seraphon at a competitive level, but I can tell you that there are a lot of people, at least up here, that don't particularly like to play against them.
Fair enough. I knew that would be a hot take, but that's okay. I'm going to keep it in. It's fine. Look, it's just not fun to play against overpowered armies. If Seraphon weren't as strong as they are, they'd be fun.
That's the thing. It's not that the army is not fun to play against in the fact that, like, its rules aren't good or not thematic or whatever. It's that the army is just a little too strong right now.
Yeah. The thing is, it's also too strong in a way that's not obvious. It's quite subtle how it's too strong because it's picking you apart in multiple phases of the game, denying you options, taking key pieces off as you need it. It's not as obvious as why Ironjaws would. If Ironjaws, for example, was overpowered, it's very obvious why, because they're super fast and they're super punchy, and maybe they're even super durable, right, somehow. But, like, it's not obvious why Seraphon will be overpowered. All right. And then talking about external tuning knobs. So we talked about the point of points, which is to shift around internal army balance. And I think the reason we haven't seen a lot of point changes in Age of Sigmar 3rd edition, they've mostly kept things the same. There's been very few outliers for 3rd edition battle tomes. They have not been changing the points drastically, right? Like we saw Stormdrake Guard, that was huge, but everything else has more or less stayed pretty close. They haven't done huge point shifts. And instead, they've opted to do the battle scroll, which I think is a great idea. I was a little skeptical of it when it first came out because I thought, well, if they can't get the points right, if they can't balance the game with the points, then I guess they have to start changing the rules. But that sucks because I bought a book. It cost me money. I have it physically in front of me. I like having the book. And now I have to take this book and throw it in the trash because it's not correct. And that sucks.
Yeah. Definitely.
But what can you do, right? The game's not perfect and they're working on it. So I guess that's just what we're going to get. So an external tuning knob, you can change points, and that can change how powerful a faction is, right? Stormdrake Guard, if they are being spammed and they're too powerful, make them 500 points, bam, problem solved. Like, that's not an issue anymore, right?
Yeah.
But that messes up internal balance. Well, what if we change the rules of Stormdrake Guard by getting rid of their really oppressive, non-fun, not really thematically appropriate pregame or anytime they want move? I was going to say pregame move, but it's anytime. So what if we got rid of Draconic Onslaught? Okay. now maybe we can turn the points down too.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us will agree that's the issue when they make these drastic changes to the rules of units and then don't address them internally, then it feels like you're getting kicked twice.
Like, this is gonna sound like a hot take, but I think like Nagash, for instance, he's like the one god, the god monster that does not benefit from literally anything in any of the battle tomes in depth. After that change, he could have gone down 100.
Absolutely. There's no reason for him to be as expensive as he is.
He could go down 100 points and be completely fine. All it would net most of the death armies out there is like an additional score.
Yeah. No, I think it's fine for them to release really big rule changes and then wait and see what happens. Because then if it turns out that, oh, no, you know what, turns out even with these rule changes, even with these nerfs, let's say, it's fine at these point values, right? Like they nerf the heck out of Nagash. And maybe now he's too weak. Maybe we can change his points and it feels justified. And I recall when they put out the first battle scroll of Kragnos, I was like, guys, Kragnos is overpowered. There's no way this is fair. He used to be 700 points and people used him with this war scroll, and now they like made it way better. There's no way that's fair. But it turns out no, Kragnos is actually just fine. Like he's not overpowered at any means. So sometimes it's right to wait, see what happens, because maybe no changes are needed. Maybe changes are needed, but they're not obviously needed, right? Like, and I think Stormdrake might fall into that category where it's like, well, you know what? Let's see where they land at 340 points without Draconic Onslaught.
All other than Daniel, who's running them? Everyone's dropped them.
Pretty much.
I was running them until they disappeared.
Well,
I mean, what I mean is like in general when I say disappeared, I mean like when I see podium results since the battle scroll, when I see like the top.
Yeah. No one's doing an all dragons list.
Yeah, even I ran them, and I technically ran a unit of 2 Stormdrakes in my last tournament, and they felt fine. They didn't feel like worth it. They didn't feel like they were doing 340 points worth of,
yes.
You know, like if I had a Toleron at 280, because mostly what I was using them for was roar. I was using them for roar half the time. So I was like, if I just had a Toleron to roar with, my Annihilators would deal with this problem. All I needed was roar, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, see that now, it's pretty easy to convince people. And what if we drop the cost of Stormdrakes back to 285? I don't think many people would complain that much at this point. But
I think that breadth can spike. I think I'd give them a concession, and 285 was maybe too cheap. I'd take a 305 point unit.
Let's say
I'll take it.
Yeah. But the point is, now there's an argument. We can see clearly that there is an argument that they should be dropped down in cost. Whereas when the Draconic Onslaught change happened, it wasn't obvious that would be the case. And community perception matters a lot here, because if you give it enough time, things settle and opinions shift, right? Like we're seeing Daughters of Cain, great. They're starting to use things that aren't Marathi. That's great. Stormdrakes are starting to fall out of favor because they're just a little inefficient for their cost. So there's justification to change them because they did the right thing and waited. And I mean, I hate that they waited, because I would like for more rapid updates, because it sucks to get a core ability on a model completely stripped off. There are people out there who bought dozens of Stormdrakes and their lists are invalidated because of this change, and that really sucks. The books that we have, that we all got, they are invalidated, and that sucks. There are costs to doing things this way, but ultimately, it's a good thing for the game as a whole. I wish they could find a better way to do it, but it's like better than not doing it.
Yeah.
So similarly with Thunderbolt Volley, I was really upset when they put that change out, and I gave it like a day, and I started thinking, oh, you know what? I don't have to bring 6 long strikes or 15 Judicators anymore. And sometimes I just want to run 5 now, and that feels good to do. And that's still worth a command point. My internal balancing options have blown open. So many different lists are viable now. You can still run the 15 blocks. They're not going to obliterate the enemy army on turn 1 like they used to, but they're still good. So in terms of internal balance, that was a great change. External balance, obviously, it sucks, right? That was a key thing that was keeping Stormcast above the 50% win rate that we think for, like, oh, this is a really good army. But we've adapted, and I think Stormcast are doing just fine without it.
Yeah.
The first battle scroll. Go ahead, Jack.
No, I was going to say, I think the army as a whole, because of the breadth, the variety that we have, could pivot. My personal opinion is our shooting units are now overpointed in comparison to the same role that is filled in other armies now
I don't
because
I don't necessarily think so. I think because we have one of the access to the one of the best positioning tools, which is translocation and silence.
with translocation.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
So just
Will attacks over other people's shooting units, but in my opinion, if they did point shooting units with Thunderbolt Volley in mind, I'm not saying the point should go down by like something crazy like 30, but maybe like 5,
No.
10, like a pity
Yeah.
almost. But I'm fine either way if that doesn't happen. It's not a huge.
Well, yeah, back to our discussion about comparing units across factions. You can say, well, crossbow adjudicate, or let's say bow adjudicators are 200, bow snakes
Right.
are 170. How is this fair? Well, it's because bow adjudicators are in a Stormcast army with the Stormcast keyword, and they can use translocation to teleport before shooting. They can use Thunderbolt Volley to double tap. They can use Signs of the Storm to not be on the table and get shot by other things, and then drop in at the perfect spot. So there's context, right? That's why the comparison across armies isn't always a useful metric.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, and I have slowly come around to agreeing with portions of that viewpoint versus my outright refusal to budge when this conversation started with us.
Well,
but I still think that we got a little overcorrected, and I would like to see Games Workshop back off the throttle a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Totally,
yeah. I totally see them reducing dragon points. Like I think dragons are like the prime example because the nerfs were handed out in such a sequential way. You get, before the model even comes out, the unit goes up by 60 points.
Yeah.
Then put on the hunt. Then it gets put on the draconic onslaught removal. And then they don't think about, well, what about that change we made back in the day when we said this current War Scroll is worth 340? Is it still worth 340?
Right.
Yep. Well, let's talk about some other changes they made through the Battle Scroll. We talked about Gods briefly, and that they lose access to all Allegiance abilities. They all got new War Scrolls, like Kragnos, Archaon, and Nagash were dominating the game, and not in a good way, right? That was
right.
They were, along with Maw Crushes, that was the meta. It was these 4 mega monsters that were save stacking. Amulet of Destiny was part of that, and they were just destroying everything because effective health, right? We talked about this on Mortal Wounds 101, that video, where their effective health just flies through the roof when you have a 2+ ignoring Rend 2 and a 5-up board. Yeah, good luck, right?
Yeah.
So that was a great change.
Absolutely insane when he had access to like OBR Allegiance. Like, I'm not gonna name them, but like there's a certain very good tournament player that I watch for inspiration that used to run Petrifex Elite Nagash. 2-up save, ignoring Rend, extra Rend when they want it. And like they were just crushing people. And then, I guess one day the new Stormcast book came out and 6 Raptors deleted him with Thunderbolt Volley the way it was. Yep. And then they started talking about how bad and unfair the game felt. And I was like, okay.
Well, Thunderbolt Volley definitely felt like it was necessary to compete with those monsters. So maybe it was designed on purpose that way because that's what they were playing. But after those monsters were changed slowly over time, we saw the Amulet of Destiny nerf, the changes to the God models. We saw a change to Heroic Leadership or Heroic Recovery. We've seen them chip away at the monster meta. And now it's like, well, you probably don't need Thunderbolt Volley on 6 Raptors anymore. Probably fine.
I would, for me, the reason I felt bad because I face Gargants a lot. There's a Gargant player in our meta, and I feel for that army, I felt like I always needed it.
Yeah.
Made that matchup so much harder because of the amount of wounds I have. But yeah.
Yep. The Unleash Hell change was another change that came through Rada's or Battle Scroll. I think it was the Battle Scroll specifically.
It was a Battle Scroll, yes.
Unleash Hell was ridiculous.
Yeah, it was real bad.
So stupid.
30 Sentinels, good luck charging them.
Yeah, and that's an example of, well, Lumineth maybe, and I'm not saying they did, but let's assume they had good internal balance and good external balance. A change like Unleash Hell outside of both of those paradigms comes in and just ruins it because it turns out they were relying on that ability more than people thought. So, rule changes, they're typically not happening for internal balancing. Usually when there's a rule change, it's because something is grossly overpowered. They very rarely make rule changes because things are really weak. That's something we've seen a few times, though, through White Dwarf. They've put out these updates for specific factions that have just boosted their power and made them playable, right? Which is fine. Like, it's better it's better to have more variety in the game, even if it's a little bit unbalanced, than having the same thing but feel balanced. Like I'd rather just have the more wackiness than consistently boring stuff. But when they do rule changes, it's for external reasons. It's not for internal reasons. Points are generally how they mess with internal balance. Like if and that's usually not something they change anymore in third edition. They've been doing very few point changes because I think on their end they like the way that factions are kind of internally balanced. I think they feel fine about that. So we are more likely to see rule changes more than anything else. But what if you can't pinpoint a specific rule, right? Like what if, and I think this is where the hunt idea comes from. It's like, well, we're not sure that we can remove Thunderbolt Volley and Draconic Onslaught right now. What if we had another external balancing mechanism, the hunt, bonus victory points, in order to compensate for that? So that you can still use these units. They're still just as good. But when your opponent kills them, they can come back from how powerful these units are. So what do you guys think about the hunt overall as an external balancing mechanic? I guess we should explain what it is in case people don't know. Morgonki, you want to take it?
I'm sorry. What? Explain. You wanted me to explain?
Yeah, explain what the hunt is conceptually, because I've mentioned it now.
Okay, so like, I guess most of our viewers will know this, but the hunt was essentially a battle scroll change where you were given extra victory points for target priority units in the game that were seeing a lot of play, generally because of their powerful abilities and impact on the battlefield. In addition, you saw something called Prime Hunters, which was a way for GW to give extra victory points to factions that were generally struggling against these high impact units or in the meta in general. So like the old Sylvanath, Nighthaunt, Ossiarch Bone Reapers were all hunters, whereas things like the Stormdrake Guard, Vanguard Raptors, Fulminators, the Mega Gargants, pretty much all of them except the War Stomper, I think, got put on the hunt list, the priority target list. And as a mechanic, I think I liked it. I think it did do a lot to balance some units out. I don't think it did much to like really kill Stormdrakes. It made the matches a lot closer for the armies that could beat them. But overall, Draconic Onslaught was just a pin and win thing. So yeah, you're getting some points for killing them, but you're still not scoring any of the real objectives. I think against Gargants it really helped because there were some armies that just couldn't get past like the 4 or 5 VP lead that the Gargants would get because they would need to reduce the Gargant to 0 wounds before they could even realistically start scoring. So having that 5 or 6 point victory boost as they finally start to take Gargants down in round 4 and round 5 really helped boost that matchup. Against Ironjaws, again, it didn't really have any impact because it turns out as more 3.0 books came out, Ironjaws is fine. They've never really been a problem. So I think it was a good intermediate thing that they tried out. And before finally saying, okay, look, try this. This is not a problem. This is a problem. Let's go further with our balancing and like fix these. And I think like part of the reason, like I don't know if you guys follow the T Sports Network, Gargants are back up. Gargants
they are
gone down to something like a 48 or 50% win rate. They're at 58% right now. They're just a good faction.
Yeah, we definitely. The rumors of their death were greatly exaggerated on this channel, let's say. But about the hunt, yeah, I think I like the idea of the hunt because it gives another tool that they can use without really messing up internal balance, right? Like Fulminators were on the hunt, they were still doing fine. Vanguard Raptors were super risky and people still used them because they're just really, really good. And turns out when you were winning games, the hunt didn't matter. And then occasionally it would swing things in the other way. But with a unit like
my experience.
With a unit like Vanguard Raptors, if you lost them, you were probably going to lose the game anyway, right? Like they were so fragile, so feast or famine. It didn't really impact our internal balance, right? People didn't swap from Fulminators to Concussors. People didn't stop using Stormdrake Guard. It was just a couple points here or there to shore up win rates. So I like that aspect of the hunt. I thought that was really cool. But it just felt weird that there was also this prime, like these factions that are doing poorly, well, they get double points from doing this. That felt off to me. And like, I don't even necessarily know why. It almost felt like an admission that they didn't design the game properly and like they're just slapping band-aids on it to make it work, which I guess that's better than not doing anything. It just doesn't feel elegant. It doesn't feel like a proper game design.
I have to say that I was totally okay with the Prime Hunters. My issue with it was that it wasn't keyword locked. And so Kragnos in a Gloomspite Gets list scores bonus victory points for annihilating Stormdrake Guard, and he's really good at it. And it's like, that's not... I didn't feel like that was particularly fair. Like, if a bunch of squig hoppers kill my Stormdrakes, you deserve all the victory points in the world.
Yeah, but that's like a small oversight. I don't think they actually like ever intended that. And the hunt only lasted like 2 months, is my
Oh, it's like 3 months. Yeah.
Most of the factions on the hunt, they were like factions that were due for a new book. With the exception of Gits, I think. Because everyone else got like a White Dwarf up. They didn't put any like Caradon Overlords or Beasts of Chaos for a reason.
Yeah.
I think that's my biggest criticism of the hunt, was that it only lasted 3 months, and it was very you could ignore it in most games. Like, it was like, here's how we're going to balance the game, and it's going to be something that most people just won't even care about and won't integrate into their games, and it adds this extra level of complexity that's frankly not worth it unless you're playing like top tables at a competitive game. That's where it'll make a difference. Otherwise, I think most people just ignored it. Like, I went to gaming stores at the time, and it was like, nah, we're just not going to do this. It's too much effort. It's like, you can't convince people to play with terrain rules. Are you going to convince them to play with the hunt?
It's like a thing where I think, like, yeah, it's only going to really matter at like competitive GTs, but I think it has a trickle down effect, or like the course of it. If they're using it to make decisions like long term about how to balance the game, I think it has.
That's what I'm saying. Because it only lasted so, like, because it came and went, it's got this kind of stink on it, where it's like, oh, the next time they bring back the hunt, well, just wait 3 months and it'll be gone, so why should we bother playing with it now?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of where I'm at. So would you guys prefer more rule changes? Like, should they increase the pace of rule changes? Should they do more in battle scrolls to push external balance? Should they make internal point changes in the battle scroll? Like, what would you guys want to see out of this concept?
For me personally, I'm a big believer in, you don't punish people for having cool stuff. If there are armies that are really, really struggling, I would much prefer the battle scroll double down on like the White Dwarf updates to try to bring those factions and make them viable in the scene. Because I would like to see, I don't want to fight the same 6 lists every time I go to an event.
Well, the White Dwarf updates are kind of a problem too, right? First off, because they're
like
super inconsistent.
So yeah, my problem is A, they're not, B, like whenever these updates happen, I don't know if you've seen the crazy stuff that Khorne can do. Like, I'm glad that faction actually has some power now. Blades of Khorne actually feels like a threatening faction that has good summoning abilities with Blood Tide. You know, lots of ways to move in the hero phase, kind of like how dragons do. Lots of ways to charge in the hero phase. Lots of ways to fight in the hero phase. Lots of ways to fight twice. And with Bloodthirsters, that gets crazy when you start spending Blood Tide to do it. But it's like, is this intended? Like, yeah, it feels really strong, and it's great that Blades of Khorne is strong, but when you have a Bloodthirster that can move in the hero phase, hit you, fight twice, you're like, oh, wait a second, what just happened? This 260-point unit just demolished half my army.
Right. Yeah, it might be internally balanced, and it might be externally balanced, but is it narratively appropriate, and is it fun?
Yeah,
No,
and the thing,
both of those.
like I said, that they're making it strong, but it's like I constantly say, you cannot address one without necessarily addressing the other, because it causes that then. It causes this kind of situations a lot.
Yeah.
It causes the Dragon Ogre spam. It causes this like Bloodthirster like tide we're seeing in Blades of Khorne, which is pretty strong in my opinion. You know?
So the inconsistency of the White Dwarfs is definitely a problem, right? Like, Seraphon were a strong faction and they got stronger. OBR got some cool stuff, but ultimately it's just whatever. It's nothing on the scale of Khorne.
Yeah, to what they're trying to do. Yeah.
You got the new Arcanaut Admiral through White Dwarf, right? There's been cool stuff, but in addition to it being inconsistently strong for different factions, the pacing of the White Dwarf updates is a problem. It's like, whenever they feel like it, for whatever reason, hey, your faction's now stronger. We don't know how much stronger, and we don't know which faction, we don't know when, but like, it's going to just happen at some point, right? So like, are Stormcast randomly going to get a power boost through a White Dwarf? Okay, I guess another problem with it is you got to go buy the White Dwarf. What happens when it's no longer on stands, right? What if the physical copy is sold out and you still have a year to go until your next Battle Tome? That's a problem.
Yeah.
Another issue is that they're doing them.
They used to be more comprehensive. Like when we got the Sempiternals, which was like a break off from Annals of the Heldenhammer, it like came with its like own points updates and everything. Like you had the protection, you had the abilities, you had the War Scroll for the new Lord Arcanum, and you had the points. My problem is they just like sort of put this patch in there without thinking, oh hey, what happens if what happens if I increase this unit's rank to like -2? Does that mean its points should go up? Should it be 150 points? Like, and that's where it can cause problems. And like, I don't know. Like, would I prefer more consistency? Yes, but also if they're making everything consistent, what do you mean by consistent? Because consistent can mean as weak as OBR's update, or it can mean as strong as Beasts of Chaos or Blades of Corn. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, my preferred solution is not to do these like whenever they want for whatever faction they want for however strong they want to make them. Just make it like what we saw with season 1 in the General's Handbook. That's fantastic. Everybody all at the same time gets the same rule changes. Some factions are going to benefit a little bit more, but it feels like everybody got more powerful and is taking advantage of it in different ways. Like if you're going to make random changes to the game, just cut that out. Just do it in a Battle Scroll update. If you want to be experimental, do experimental stuff there. Not White Dwarfs. It's just not the right medium for it. Like I get they're trying to sell magazines, but it is making the game a little bit worse every time they do it. There's a lot of problems with it. Okay, I think that wraps up our discussion. Do you guys have any closing thoughts on internal balance, external balance?
For Battle Scroll this month, man, that's all I'm hoping for before this October tournament. I'm really hoping to fix Kronspine. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. They got to fix Kronspine. How would you guys fix it? What would you do to with that? Let's say
level 1.
Yeah. Start at level 1.
Well, don't make it like AOS is a largely melee game. Yes, armies have a lot of good shooting. Some armies do. It is primarily still a melee game. If you are suicide charging into it, then you should be allowed to kill it in that turn. I don't think it should be a 2-turn killer like Marath. If it is going to stay like what it is, it needs to be 600 points, not 400.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be the only ally you can take, and 550 to 600 points. Like Karazai at 600 makes no sense. Prince Wardry at 430 from Soul by Gravelords makes no sense when this thing exists.
Yeah, agreed.
Or
it is way underpointed.
Or this is change number 3. When it does go wild, you take turns controlling.
Yeah.
I control it in my turn, you control it in yours. This means because right now players want it to go wild. It's actually better if it goes wild for them because it gets a run and charge. It gets a +1 to hit automatically, so it's hitting on 2s now. There's no real downside to it. But if you add hey, if I kill that little guy in the back you've bonded it to somehow with my abilities, well, guess what? Now in my turn, I'm going to be hitting you with your Kronspine. And I'm going to be decided because this literally happened to me at ATC. I killed his navigator in the boat using Thunderbolt Volley and rolled like 2 6s and he failed his last save. And then his Kronspine went wild. His boats expanded forward. The Kronspine went towards my dragons, but couldn't complete the charge to the dragons. Did complete the charge to his Ironclad. But guess what? It's the Ironclad. There's a hero and there's like some Thunders or Arcanaut in there. He can just say, I'm going to put all this attacks into this one inconsequential hero that I don't care. He still gets to choose, which is ridiculous. Yeah. The whole point of it going wild is they can hit your own things. But if your opponent doesn't decide, what's the point?
Well, at the very least, I would love it if the movement was controlled by the opponent when it went wild.
Yeah.
Or if it was controlled like an endless spell. So whoever's turn it is gets to control to move the
You control it on your turn, I control it on my turn.
Yeah.
If it goes wild. And then that's actually some counterplay to a really efficient monster. And now there's an actual downside. You got to think about it. Do I take this unkillable thing, or what happens if they snipe my thing?
Because that would justify the 400 point cost. It's like, okay, it's really, really good for what it does at 400, but if that hero it's bonded to dies, you got a real problem on your hands. And I think that's fine. And that's fun too, which I want to make sure we keep the focus on fun.
Mm-hmm.
If it's just a 600-point monster that keeps doing what it does, like, yeah, that might be balanced, but it's not as much fun as this thing going wild and killing its own army, which is really, I think,
Well, that's what I mean. Like, it's not a battle. Like, I'd rather see one of those two things. Either way, we're going to see less of them. Either because people don't want to take that risk, but some people are nuts and they want to have fun, and they can have fun. So I like the one where both players control it if it goes wild. Or you can just make it 600 points to where people don't necessarily want to risk a fourth of their army into this kind of model.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great. If the Kronspine going wild really hurt the person who brought it, that would be great, because it would also be like, oh, you brought a Kronspine? Fantastic. I'm going to make you suffer for it. Like, get a little bit of Schadenfreude, you know? It's going to be good.
Yeah.
Any other big changes we want to see in the September War Scroll while we're on the topic? Do Sylvaneth need to be nerfed?
So Spellsinger nerfed to one spell through the portal.
Yes.
Drowned Men changed to no pregame move. Maybe like, I don't know.
One unit.
Make them -1 to hit.
One unit can pregame move.
Sure. Fine. Why not? And Spellsinger, and what else? I think there was
Beast of Chaos. How would you fix that?
Beast of Chaos, yeah. I don't even know.
Dragon Ogres can't rally.
I think the faction feels powerful. I think it should feel powerful for its effects. I like how the faction feels. I don't like how many models they can spam for that. Because if I'm paying 240 points for -2 rend, 2 damage, I'm sorry. You should not be able to have that at 125. That's just ridiculous. Like, we keep talking about how we can't compare like models from other armies, but there is a certain threshold where -2 rend, 2 damage means something in terms of points.
Yeah.
And you can't just hand that out willy-nilly to something like a 60 or 80 point unit, you know?
Well, yeah. I think that it should be that we should see things like either the unit benefits from the increased rend or the unit benefits from battle shock and rally, but it shouldn't be both.
I would just like maybe increase even like the way that the circle goes out, like maybe decrease the range, so make them play much tighter. Because like it starts out at 12, which is pretty good, all you need for round 1, really. Then it goes to 18, then it goes to 24, and then after that you don't really need it. The board's not that big.
Wouldn't the simplest change just be to make Dragon Ogres cost, I don't know, 200?
Yeah, no, that's what
totally, absolutely.
Like I think Bulgors need to go by like 20, Dragon Ogres need to go by like 40 or 50. I think like the Gores are actually fine. Like I can see why this Eternal Balance update the way it was, because all the Gores and everything with the -1 rend or -2 rend round 3 onwards, they feel just. They're completely fine. Yeah. But like things like Zangor Enlightened, Bulgors, and Dragon Ogres, they feel absurd with this for them.
Yeah.
Like you're talking about 215 point Zangor Enlightened that shoot across the board with a 20-inch move and just kill you. Like what?
Yeah. Definitely not fun. Thankfully, they're fragile, so there's some silver lining there. But yeah, they definitely were not designed with an extra 2 rend in mind and a 4-up rally. Definitely not.
Yeah.
So yeah. Other things I want to see. I would love Storm Drakes to go down to 300. I think that's a fair point cost for that.
I'd be happy with 310, man. Like, give me like a 30-point decrease. Make the Knight Draconis playable. Just bring him back to 260 again. Why'd he go up to 300? No idea. He didn't even have the pregame move on him.
Yeah.
If he had the pregame move too, I would get that. But why'd he go up by 60 points? I have no idea.
Yeah.
Because it's theoretically possible for you to spike like 24 mortal wounds off that breath weapon. That's why.
Oh, but it's also. Okay.
Here's what I want to see in the War Scroll, in the Battle Scroll. Stormdrake Guard don't have D6 mortal wound breath anymore. I hate random spike mortal wounds so much.
2 up D3.
2 up to
2 up D3. Yeah.
2 up D3.
If they did 2 up D3, they could go back to 280 and 255.
I'd be down with that.
Yep. Absolutely. And I'd love to play them.
Krondys and Karazai deal double the mortal wounds on their breaths.
No, Krondys and Karazai need to be 500 points. They need to be same as a Lord Celestin on Stardrake, not 600. Why are they 600?
I can see that, yeah.
They're pointed like gods, but they're not gods at all. At all.
Krondys should learn every Stormcast spell.
Yeah, I would like that.
Because it sucks to only pick one spell with him. That just really sucks. It doesn't fit. It's like, here's the second in command to Sigmar, a dragon that's like older than the concept of time in the mortal realms almost. has lived countless generations. He can pick one spell.
Yeah.
He's even got like a Super Sigmar friendship bracelet and like friendship gauntlets, and he still just learns the one spell. Like, it's so sad.
The thing is, it wouldn't even be that overpowered because most of the things in the game that know the lore generally have access to like 3. So that can be a little oppressive. But like he only has 2, so you're gonna cast his War Scroll spell, then you have to make a choice between the others. So
yeah, I honestly, what I would like to see is like Karazai to go to 500, Kronspine to go to like 550, and for him to get bonus to Dispel.
no, I'm okay with Kronus not being bonus to Dispel. I don't want him to be a magic dom piece because ultimately Stormcasts aren't about magic dominance. He is like, I will help my fellow Sigmarite dudes do better, but not necessarily help deny the opponents. Like he's not a magic dom. He's not. I'm okay with the +3 to Dispel would be insane, man. Who?
What are you, a Rune Lord? Come on.
Yeah, what are you, a Rune Lord?
A 95 point
Yeah, what are
hero?
you, a 95-point hero?
Like, +3 to
This thing's going to my list.
What are you, techless? Hell no. Good no.
No,
he's not bad in combat. Kronus is all right, pretty good in combat compared to like the solid magic down pieces like Archon, for instance.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I think they're a little too overcosted. I think 600 is insane for them. I think they were never worth more than 500.
Even now, in a horde meta, they're not worth their points, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Thanquol. James wants to know what we would do with Thanquol if any changes are required. No? I'm gonna say no.
Yeah, go ahead.
He's stupid. In the right scenario, Thanquol is just stupid. But it's a situational scenario that might not come up. And you can play around it. Mostly. You can mostly play around it. The Louch-on Thanquol thing, okay, that's a little dumb. Maybe there should be a wound restriction on Louch-on. No wizards with 10 or more wounds. Maybe something like that.
I think that should be there. Because it's only going to get worse.
Yeah, every 12 wound hero can take an Arcane Tome and teleport themselves.
If Zinja's coming out right now, it's going to get...
Are you ready for Pink Horrors, Tar Pits charging you off a Louch-on boat?
Please don't.
Oh, please. Are you ready for Venari Dawn Riders doing it? Are you ready for Venari Blade Lords doing it?
It's going to be so dumb.
Yeah.
If speaking of units that are wizards, can my stupid evocators please cast a war faction spell, please?
No, I think it's okay if they don't. I think evocators not being. It's like I think it's fine. It's not a huge. It's not. It doesn't feel like a problem.
Let me cast Empower on something besides Sacrosanct and Redeemer. Let Empower cast on any Stormcast unit. That's good enough for me. So they basically have Celestial Blades.
Good. Yeah. Good. Because that's what I'm going to use them for anyway.
Pretty much. But then also Empower works on shooting too, and maybe that's too good. Maybe just melee weapons.
Yeah, I don't think shooting. I don't think it should work on shooting, but then it's fine. Like I just want to see just some big dragon drops, Sacrosanct point drops, Stormdrake point drops, and I think the book is great. I would also there's like a whole fix I would make with how our priests and our wizards are pointed, but that's for another time.
Mm-hmm.
I think I just for starters I'd be okay with some dragon drops and some Sacrosanct points, and that's it.
Yeah. Here's a change I'd like to see in the battle scroll. Aside from Techless, every other ability in the game that automatically casts a spell and says it can't be unbound should have that last part stricken and should be replaced with a casting value of 10. So that these auto-cast spells have some amount of counterplay, because it is really, really boring to just automatically have a purple sun in your face.
Yeah, I think the for that matter, I think Nighthaun's Midnight Tome should be a Nighthaun. I don't think it should be. I don't think Purple Sun should be part of their Allegiance ability when they already have their endless spells in their Allegiance abilities.
Mm-hmm.
On that subject, the auto slay thing from Purple Sun needs to go.
Oh yeah, the insta. I mean, I know Paul doesn't disagree. Paul doesn't agree on this. Like, he thinks that insta kill is great. I just think it has games where it just has way too many swingy games where it turns the game around and causes bad feels. I'm not even talking about God monster model kills. I mean, I'm just talking about you played it right. Your Gardas gets deleted, your Relictor gets deleted, your Castellan gets deleted 3 ones in a row, and then you've insta lost the game despite not really doing anything wrong.
Yep.
It should probably do something else besides instant kill heroes. I get that.
Make it do mortal wounds.
It did that before, and the problem, you have to find the right kind of way of doing mortal wounds where it has to, like, I like the idea that it can instantly kill.
The thing is, like, it used to do mortal wounds, and now it reduces save rolls. If it said something like units affected by its 3-inch aura cannot take ward rolls as well, I would be fine with that. Like, just be like, yeah, death is very near you. Your save is gone, and your ward save is gone.
I'm okay with that. But I kind of just like the idea that this is a killer spell on its own right. I like the idea that the spells themselves are threatening, not just giving buffs to units that become more threatening. Like, I don't want spells that are just force multipliers.
Well, the problem with insta-kill spells is, like, it's like Hand of Dust. It's like, it has to come at a certain cost. Where it's either incredibly short range or incredibly high cast. But the fact that armies can get it out easily, it's not really short range. It has pretty good range, like 16-inch plus 6 for the aura, so really 22. You know, Hand of Dust is like, you have to take Umbral Spell Portal. You have to cast it through the Umbral Spell Portal. It's 3 inches otherwise or something. So it's like,
Yeah, I don't know. There's something that's got to change with Purple Sun where it's killing 600-point models instantly. I don't like that aspect of it, but I also like that it's killing 600-point models instantly because it's like, this is the punishment for you putting all your eggs in one basket, right? And I like that exists, but maybe it's a little too punishing.
I think it would still see play, even with the Ren benefit. Like, armies that can just, like...
People are not taking it.
Off of the Ren benefit, the insta-kill is just like, oh, I'll just win the game 2 turns sooner.
What if it can instant kill, but only against Night Haunt?
Sure. All right.
Yep.
What else?
What else can we change? Battle scroll. Last thoughts. What are we gonna do here? Laochan restricted to 10 wounds or less characteristic.
Yeah.
Obviously. Some change to Purple Sun, so people stop crying about it, but not so much of a change that I have to get rid of the Purple Sun kill shots channel, which I really like. All right, we'll have to think of more and do this again. We'll see with the Battle Scroll. When do you guys think it's coming out? Probably next weekend, if I had to guess.
I don't know.
God, I hope so.
3 weeks.
God, I hope so.
Who knows with GW, really?
Well, they said Tzeentch and Lumineth are summer releases, right? It's September. There's only a couple weeks left in summer. They better do it soon. So maybe those books come out.
Isn't Labor Day the end of summer?
No,
because that was this weekend. That was the 21st. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's technically 2 weeks left because this week's releases we already know. So those books have to be next week or the week after, or they just lied to us again, which they've done in the past, and I wouldn't be surprised if they did again.
Yeah.
So
got delayed.
I can see the Battle Scroll coming out at the same time because they like doing rule dumps all in one day. And I don't think they'd wait for the FAQ for those books.
So you think we're going to get the Lumineth Realm Lords like 4th Battle Tome in 2 years, and the new Tzeentch book and the Battle Scroll all at the same time?
Yep. Because we got Skaven, Sylvaneth, and General's Handbook at the same time.
That's
and
fair.
we got Battle Scroll, Idoneth, and Fyreslayers at the same time, I think, or was it Daughters, Night Haunt, Battle Scroll? I can't recall. But yeah, they like doing single rule dumps. So hopefully sometime within the next 2 weeks, and I'm sure hopefully 2 weeks. That would be great because then I'd be back from my honeymoon and I would have time to make more content, which would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we can close out the stream here. Thank you everybody for joining us. Congratulations to our winners from the contest and everybody who entered. Honestly, it's been a lot of fun. And a big shout out to Kaiju Wargaming for sponsoring that contest so that we can give prizes and get people excited and involved with our community. And look forward to more stuff from us soon, like dice. We're working on dice right now. So
heck yeah.
All right. Have a good one, guys. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, everybody. Everybody have a good night.